We're going to call this workshop to order. It is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. It is 1:01. Today we have a long list of presentations from the superintendent. Just to remind the public, we are adhering to the CDC guidelines of no more than 10 individuals in the room at one time, and then also practicing social distancing of 6 feet apart. Currently, who you'll see throughout the camera today, you'll see our coordinator of tech and sound, Brandon, behind us. Obviously, Dr. Moore will be in person today. Mrs. D'Agresta, our school board attorney. And then we have 3 individual school board members that will be joining us on Teams today. That's Dr. Schiff, Mrs. Rosario, and Mrs. Barenborg. And then Mrs. Justice will be joining us in person shortly. So at this time, Dr. Moore, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, School Board Chair, Ms. Zork. We do have a number of presentations by Cabinet Day, information to share with our board. I'd like to start by reviewing this morning's activities. We had the opportunity to present our referendum to the Board of County Commissioners, asking them to place that referendum on the ballot for August. Our county commissioners all were in great support of the implementation of the item and the ask within the item, but unfortunately selected to replace it on the November election, which is, for me, extremely frustrating in terms of managing and operating this system as a whole, to be in a situation to maximize dollars, to make decisions, to ensure that we are unified and connected and working in a cohesive way. My job becomes significantly harder to uphold that expectation that has been set by this school board. So it is a point of frustration for me. But honestly, I left the meeting feeling proud and honored. And I say that because our principals, our union representation, both of our unions, along with us, stood together as one team, speaking in unison, speaking with a desire for us to be acting in the best interest of children. A number of our community members came out and spoke in support of the momentum that we have built as a system. I've never questioned whether this community would support this referendum, whether it be in August or in November. I think this community has done nothing but embrace me, but continually reassure and allow me to have a great sense of thanks for being part of this community. And I know they would come out and support. I know they would come out and support whether it was August or it was in November. And I think as a community, I have seen firsthand, whether it be in Fellsmere or whether it be here in Indian River Mall, we are in support of our teachers and our educators. So Mr. Fagan and myself will continue to work through to identify how we could make the absolute best decisions and push off some decisions that are really important decisions in the time to come. We have more unknowns than we have knowns. One of the unknowns is our budget, and we continue to talk through our budget process, not having a factual dollar signed off by our governor. One of those unknowns within that budget is the bringing beginning teacher pay or beginning teacher compensation to $47,500, which for our teachers, a new teacher, that's a significant increase. And we're looking forward to having a clear understanding as to how long we'll have this incentive dollars, the referendum dollars that we would use to compensate and recruit our teachers and maintain our teachers. We won't have that answer till November. So it puts us in a weird situation if that unknown becomes a known, and we have to fund that for beginning teachers, compensating beginning teachers without being able to negotiate a long-term contract, which is our goal. And I think we are making significant progress in working towards that. So we will work through those unknowns as they become known in the coming months. We will continue to act in the best interests of children, despite the obstacles that are now part of our life that didn't necessarily have to be part of our life. So I don't know, Madam Chair, if board members have any comments before we go through our agenda, but I think I would afford that time.
Okay. Dr. Schiff? You have the floor.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. Thank you for your comments this morning, and everybody's comments at the County Commission meeting. Like you, I am grateful that they saw the need and disappointed that it was pushed back to November for all the reasons you just said. I'm wondering, most of us, some of us were here at the last one in 2016 and before that, and I'm wondering for anybody who has the history, do you recall if this was generally went in August or November, and what, if anything, might have been the impact of that?
Dr. Schiff, I believe that Suzanne was here, or Mrs. D'Agresta was here during that time, and I would like to turn the floor over to her to speak to that question.
Certainly, thank you. And Dr. Schiff, in 2016, this millage was put on the August ballot. Prior to that, in 2012, there was another millage referendum, and that one was a 0.6 millage, and that referendum was put on the August ballot as well. And then in November, in 2010, if you'll remember back during that period of time, it was when our economy was in a tailspin at that moment. We were having significant economic issues in the state of Florida and around the world. And at that time, there was a different statute in effect, and it allowed the school board to pass a millage for emergency needs. And the school board in 2010 requested a 0.25 millage. That was put on the November ballot. And this is just my personal opinion. It was put on in November because some of those laws were being revised and they were effective in July. So once the legislators went through their legislative session, passed some statutes, amended some statutes so that the school board could go out for that additional emergency millage. The board then put it on the ballot for November of 2010. And then prior to that time, if you want to go way back, in 1990, the school board went to the voters on a general obligation bond, which is a different type of funding stream for large capital projects. But that particular, it's called a GEO bond, a general obligation bond, was put on the November 1990 ballot. That's a different type of bonding, a different type of finance for public schools. So that's kind of your history, if you will, of the various times the board has gone to the voters for additional dollars.
Dr. Schiff, you have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, thank you. Once the county commission makes its determination, is there ever an opportunity to revisit that, or is that ever turned around, or once it's done, and we are final, complete, this is the end? This is the final determination?
May I?
Mrs. D'Agresta.
Dr. Schiff, if the school board wished to challenge the action by the county commission, and not just between school boards and county commissions, but any time someone wishes to challenge the action of a local government, and in this situation it would be the school board challenging the decision of the county commission, there are legal steps that can be taken. For instance, the school board could, if it wished, file something called an emergency petition for a writ of mandamus, which is a fancy lawyer way of saying, asking a court to force a government to do a ministerial act that they were asked to do and didn't, or refused to do, or did differently than what the statute tells them to do. So there is a legal process that the school board could consider following. So that's an example, an emergency petition for a writ of mandamus. Another possible legal remedy is something called a declaratory judgment action. It's a little different. Sometimes if two parties are unsure of their rights and duties under a statute, and the parties are kind of at odds with each other, the parties can file something called a petition for a declaratory judgment and ask a court to interpret a statutory provision and to tell them how it applies or what the rights and obligations are under a particular statute. And a judge will then rule on that question and issue a ruling, an order of some sort with regard to the statutory interpretation or the question. So the short answer, I know I'm not a short answer person, the short answer is that yes, there are certainly legal processes that can be followed in order to challenge an action or inaction by a local government. And the two options or the two examples that I've provided to you are options in this particular situation.
Dr. Schiff, I see that you have a follow-up to that.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for the record, and because this is public, I'm not suggesting challenging legally or otherwise the ruling of the county commission. So thank you for that very comprehensive explanation. And I want it clear for whoever may be watching this. I'm not suggesting that we're going to take legal action in any way, shape, or form against the county commission's ruling. I just want to understand the process because I haven't been through it before. And I want to understand exactly how this works as it's my first time through it. So thank you.
Of course.
Mrs. Berenberger, Mrs. Rosario, I do have a question for the attorney if I don't see any other comments from the other board members. My question is, based on what I'm hearing that was proposed about the change in legislation, and that seeming to be one of the reasons is that legislation had changed to say that these votes need to go to November, and I think it sounds like that was the understanding of the commission, and that was what was said today. Suzanne, can you speak to that you know, I know as a community we always look at home rule, so you know, is there a possibility that that was what was said today at the meeting is not actually, you know, interpreted correctly? I'm just asking.
Of course, and just to review, the information that was shared by Mr. Brown, I believe it was Mr. Brown, others may have mentioned it as well, with regard to laws governing a sales surtax. And there are several different ways to generate funding as a local government and as a school board. One of those ways is to pass a sales tax referendum, which is then a couple of pennies or some small percentage that is added on to items that you purchase. Has nothing to do with property tax, has nothing to do with any other of the generated funding for school boards, but a sales tax like on gasoline or on things that you buy at the store. On a sales surtax, if that's the funding stream that you're looking at, the law has been changed couple times over the years, but the law has been changed with regard to a sales tax referendum that those election items can only be brought during a general election. So Mr. Brown was correct that that level of funding, that type of funding, a sales tax referendum, can only be brought at a general election, which is your November election. The millage that the school board is interested in taking to the voters is not a sales surtax. It is a millage that is assessed with regard to property value. So it's a different type of funding stream, a funding mechanism for a local government. So yes, they are two very different types of funding streams, and the laws that govern the millage, the 4-year operating millage that the school board is interested in asking the voters to consider, that millage statute does not contain that same limitation as to when it must be brought to the voters. The laws governing this 4-year millage allow it to be brought at either a general election or during a local referendum, which would be a primary or the other types of elections that are held throughout the year, not in November, essentially. So the statute governing this particular millage allows it to be brought at more than just the general election.
Dr. Moore, based on being at the meeting today, do you see that maybe the legal information that was provided in the way that it was, in the opinion that it was given from the county attorney is not basically the information we're getting from our attorney? Do you see a benefit in our attorney writing a letter to the county commission clarifying all the, our interpretation to those laws to see if perhaps they would entertain, considering that?
I don't disagree with the interpretation of the statutes that were explained during the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think they apply to the referendum that we are asking them to approve. And as I read from statute that we were doing exactly what statute asked them to do, is to place it on the ballot. And, we could read the statute again, direct the county commission to place it on the ballot. So I don't think that application of a sales tax applies to this particular work. And when the rubber meets the road, that decision impacts our ability to make decisions and swiftly respond to the needs of children in this district.
Mrs. Rock, may I make a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. After the meeting, I was asked to speak with a county commissioner, and I said, I just don't understand what happened here today. It seems that you've stepped out of your lane a little bit. I don't understand why this was even up for discussion, and it seems that you're in violation of statute, and that was my understanding. I didn't, and I shared that, and it was suggested to me that perhaps making this public in any way, or questioning the county commission's judgment regarding the decisions they made today may somehow have a negative effect on the school district being able to pass a millage, and perhaps rather than being upset about the fact that we were not able to, they were not willing to put it on the August, we should just keep our mouths shut and just stay the course, I guess, because it would be it would not be seen favorably for us to question their judgment.
All righty. I think we're all elected individuals for our own reasons, so, Dr. Schiff, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, and again, as I said earlier, this is about understanding the process, not questioning the county commissioner's judgment, and I want to make that really clear publicly. What I'm wondering, Dr. Moore, is if you can, or if it's even worthwhile doing, if there's any way of quantifying the impact in the difference of these several months for us. And I ask that not because of going back to the county commission or questioning their wisdom or their judgment, but as something that I personally would like to understand what the impact of this is in some way other than it delays us. And as you mentioned this morning, it has an impact on our ability to negotiate unions, negotiate contracts. But is this quantifiable, and is that in any way a worthwhile exercise for us to understand? And no is a completely acceptable answer if that's just a journey down a lane that it's not worth going.
Through the chair, we would be able to go through and say on X contracts, we're only going to contract out for a year. Of course, our vendors, we'd ask for them to work with us and delay a signing of a contract as late as possible to maximize the dollars. We have good partnerships there, but ultimately, not very many folks are going to be willing to provide services without before you have a signed contract. So very hard to negotiate those. Those things are really clear and easy to define on what that cost would be. The biggest impact ultimately would be the ability to negotiate a contract in a very complex time. And our teachers are very deserving of having that long-term contract. So to quantify it, we could do that. I think it's worth noting that this information has to be over to the, I'm sorry, who does it? Supervisor of Elections by June 1st. So the timeline and the investment of additional dollars to dispute that decision ultimately comes into play. So we have basically a 3-week window to have it to the Office of Elections so they can run, print, do early voting, those kinds of scenarios. They need to develop that particular ballot. So there is a hard deadline and a short amount of time to go through that process. And I just say that to share with the board. We don't have, a long period of time to respond.
Mrs. Rosario?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like I'm processing all of this. And I want to say that I'm going to try to get my words correct. And I'm still trying to process what Mrs. Justice just said. So I'm grateful to, sorry, I wanted to put this headphone in. I'm grateful to the County Commission for their support. It seems there is overwhelming support for the community with regard to the millage, just in general. The conflict here is the timeline, right? I don't know why the County Commission kept pushing November. It seemed to me like there was an alternative. I don't have any doubt in my mind that this won't pass. I believe that it will, whether in August or November, regardless. That doesn't seem to me to be a concern. So I believe it's going to pass, number one. I'm grateful for the overwhelming support from the community and the County Commission, number two. My greatest concern is the fact that they didn't get how crucial it is for us to run our business, our budget timeline that does not match theirs or anybody else's. And the planning of all of that may not have been articulated, the concern, or maybe the pressing of, I don't know if it was even a focus on closing teacher contracts. Maybe that was, I don't know, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. But then Mrs. Justice just added to the mix this conversation that she had that we should just, sit back, take it on the chin, and just keep going, essentially. And I'm not good with that. I don't want to be the one to get us in the middle of a fight, but I also don't want to sit back and maybe I don't take well to threats, and I don't want to call that a threat, but maybe I don't take well to intimidation. Maybe that's political intimidation, maybe. This professional bullying, this tactic that, you should just kind of stay quiet in order for you to have this. That doesn't sit well with me. So I don't know how to respond right now. I feel like I'm babbling because I have a lot of emotions, and I am trying to not insult. I'm trying to think of my words so that I don't say anything to negatively impact us. It is what it is right now. I don't know how we move forward. If we had an opportunity to write a letter, maybe to the county commission, and ask them to reconsider based on, I don't know, based on something, based on XYZ, maybe the misinterpretation of statute, maybe we didn't rightly articulate the need for us in our budget cycle. Maybe we can reiterate that. Maybe we can ask them. The other thing that I found interesting today was that Mrs. Adams made the comment that it would have been appropriate for us to bring this to their attention earlier. I'm not so sure that she understood that we did have this on the agenda earlier to go to the county commission, and we were asked to push it back because of COVID-19, because of the concerns not to have a crowded room. And because of the Children's Trust, going before them, you don't want to overwhelm them with both the Children's Trust and the school board millage at the same time. So I don't know. I'm sorry to my board members right now. I honestly feel like I'm rambling because I just don't want us to sit and twiddle our thumbs on this. Think that we have a voice. We are elected officials. We were elected to this position for a reason. I think we are here for a time such as this. And if this is our time to speak up and speak out, then let us use our voice. I will support the board moving forward on any decision that you all suggest. If you all want to sit back and just, fold our hands, then let's fold our hands, and let's just trust that Mr. Fagan and Dr. Moore are gonna do right by kids, regardless of the situation that we are faced with. But if you all want to write a letter and at least go that route and see where it gets us, maybe they'll come back to the table. There's still a little bit of time. Maybe one of the commissioners will bring it forth again. Say, hey, a couple of years ago, Mrs. Justice, the previous board voted on a uniform policy, and Mrs. Justice a week later came back to the board and said, I want us to rethink this. I think she asked for a moratorium on that policy that was just passed before. Sometimes things like that happen, and maybe that'll turn in our favor. So I'm sorry if I seem like I'm babbling, but I'd love to hear your feedback after this mess of processing my thoughts out loud.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Rosario, Mrs. Berenborg, and then I'm going to have Dr. Moore speak to.
I have one
To
more
this.
comment, Mrs.
Okay.
Zork. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to agree with Commissioner Adams on what she said. Is their job is not to. I can't remember the exact words she said, but the reason why she voted to put it in August is basically it was on us to make sure that we advertised it and promoted it and made sure it would pass in August. And since they were all sounded like they were very sure that it was going to pass, Why would they delay it? Why would they stonewall us? I'm not sure if it's a political pressure thing. I'm not sure if they're thinking about voters that are in dire times right now and thinking it might get better for them in November. I'm not quite sure. But I also felt like I could read the room and knew what they were leaning towards. But I agree with you, Ms. Rosario, and people's minds can change. I think what we need to do, if we do want to do that, is to give them some firm examples of why it is urgent to put it on in August. And I think that's what they were looking at, is the firm reasons why.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Justice?
Thank you, yes. So I agree with all of my fellow board members. It was such an interesting morning. Normally, it's fairly ministerial in nature. The county commission says, you know, we asked to put our the statute allows us to request it be placed on a ballot, and the county commission says, yes, go ahead, you can place it on the ballot, because that's really what their role is there. I don't know why what happened this morning happened. I found it very interesting. What I heard this morning, and Mrs. Rohrer, you've given me some things to think about, to be honest with you, because what I heard this morning was really concerning. It was an overreach of the county commission's power and ability, and they really stepped into an area where the school board needs to do our work. So I don't really necessarily agree that we need to justify why we want it on in August. That's for us to tell the voters. And I think it's a slippery slope when we start allowing the county commission to take, you know, as school board members, I think we've all realized how limited we are in the amount of power and flexibility we have sometimes to make the change that we want to make, especially when it comes to funding. And if we are going to allow the county commission to come in right now and to start rewriting statute or interpreting statute, it's not their place and it's not their job. I think we really have to think about that. So I come from this from a place of a little bit of anger today, Mrs. Rosario. I did not understand what happened today, and I was taken aback as well, but you've given me some things to think about. I think we should write a letter to the county commission. I think we should ask them to reconsider their decision. I think we should base it in fact and in law. I'm happy to sit down with any commissioner, or Mr. Fagan, I'm sure, and Dr. Moore are happy to sit down and go through our budget and explain to them exactly how our budget works and go through different things. But to justify, to ask for permission for something that we really didn't have to ask for permission for is giving away our power. And those commissioners will not always be there. We will not always be school board members, but that type of decision-making will have a lasting impact on the way our community and local government functions in the future. And it's important for us to be good stewards of our tax dollars and our ability to advocate for our students. And I thank you for your courage, board members, because I was very proud that everyone was there and spoke.
Mrs. Berenborg?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. I agree. I think we should write a letter, but I also saw already the headlines that are out there about that meeting this morning. And I agree with you. I think we need to have some sort of statement back, not because we need to respond to reporters, but because of the way that it looked and the perceived power that you said, that you talked about.
And we were like begging them for something that they really should just do. It was really something.
So, Suzanne, sorry, I keep calling you my first name, if that's okay. You can call me Laura. You know, again, in the beginning, I mentioned home rule. Do we have anything that we could put in a letter that could clarify the overstep of that home rule that could possibly benefit a change of opinion for us? Is there anything that you can suggest?
And Mrs. Zork, I'm happy to craft a letter that discusses the information shared about a sales surtax and that it's a different tax than the millage that the school board is seeking from the voters. I'm happy to share the information in the millage statute, the 4-year millage statute that says the school board directs the county commission to place it on a ballot, and the school board may hold or ask for the issue to be brought at either a local referendum or at the general election. I think all of that weighs in favor of the school board being the one who makes those decisions. The statute does say that we have to ask, that we direct the county commission to place it on a ballot. That's what makes this statute, I don't want to say more difficult, but a little more challenging. There are other statutes that allow a school board to put something directly on a ballot and not go through the county commission. For whatever reasons, back in the day, this statute was drafted differently, and I can't speak to why that may be. So yes, we do have to go through the county commission to get on a ballot for this particular question. But I'm happy to put together the statutory information and the prior interpretations by courts. Unfortunately, no court has interpreted this particular millage language. Courts have interpreted the language with regard to the voter process to change a superintendent from an elected to an appointed position. The courts have spoken about referendums with regard to sales tax or sales surtax votes. They've not spoken on this particular millage question. So I can't tell you what a court would say, but I can certainly put together a summary, not as wordy as I've been today, but I can certainly put together some information that will explain those legal parameters. And I know that the superintendent and Mr. Fagan have both shared factual information as far as the impact, and that information can also be wound into to the same letter, so that it's a one-stop shop, if you will, for information on the referendum. I'm happy to work on something like that.
Okay, one moment, Dr. Schiff, you're next, but I want to ask Dr. Moore before I jump over to you. Dr. Moore, what are your feelings on moving forward on this?
Through the chair, I agree. We write a letter and we provide what was defined and explained today as the interpretation of statute, asking them to do what's confined within that statute. But that's just an ask. I think we should pursue legal options as well, a parallel track. If they do not respond to our ask, we haven't wasted any time in taking the appropriate action to protect our staff, to protect our teachers, to protect the limited dollars that we receive. I agree, we should ask, but at the same time, as your superintendent, I want the authority to make decisions as quick and as fast and as effectively as possible. And I don't think the decision that was made today 100% impedes my ability as your superintendent to do as I just described. So I think we do write a letter, we send it over, but we need to act swiftly in response to that overarch of that decision.
So what I know we're up against some deadlines here. June 1st, we have to have this information. I was thinking it was, a couple of days past that, but you think it's June 1st? Is that the next county commission meeting is on Tuesday, is for us to, if we can come together in agreement, have Dr. Moore and Suzanne work on this letter to craft it, to get it over to the county commission. I don't know when their deadline is to have the information posted in their agenda, but I would like us to request to get back on the agenda so we can not only send them the letter, but also go again and present the information that was in the letter publicly before we take it to any other second step of, by all means trying to avoid any type of legal avenues on this, but I'm hoping that we can come to a resolution together. So Dr. Schiff, I see that you have a comment, question?
Yeah, I think you addressed much of it just now. My question was largely about process. If we choose to move forward with this, how do we do that? The timing of it, both in terms of this meeting as well as getting to the supervisor of elections, because I know that as we talk about this, we're taking time away from other presentations. So I in the interests of moving that forward, I want to understand, what I heard you just say was request that Dr. Moore and Ms. DeGresta write a letter. I assume that then has to come back to us as the board, or does it? And what's the process for us to review, agree to, do we have to vote on that letter? Just, could we speak about that process a bit?
Dr. Schiff, with the leadership of Dr. Moore and the challenges that he sees that we could face by not going into on the August, I 100% trust his leadership in working with Mrs. DeGresta on that, but that I'm going to leave that to the other board members. We have to come to consensus on that. We do not have time to come back on this and go back and forth unless we call for a special meeting. Dr. Schiff, do you want to speak?
Sure. I agree with you. I trust both of Dr. Moore and
I know
Ms.
you do, and I
DeGresta to
didn't.
do that.
Yeah.
If the letter is coming from the school board, then as much as I trust them,
Right.
I would want to see it before it goes to the county commission. I have no problem calling a special meeting later in the week. I have no problem with us coming together to discuss how we move forward. But I do think if it comes from the board, I want to see the letter before it goes to the county commissioner. This has implications and ramifications moving forward. And I don't want to do that lightly, and I don't want to do that without as much thought as possible within the limited time frame that we've got.
Yes, and that is a very good point. Thank you for saying that. So there are two ways we could do this that I see, and then I'll let Mrs. DeGresta or Dr. Moore or other board members weigh in. We could have them both work on the letter, craft it. Either they could email it out to board members, and then we could give them individual feedback on it, or we could go ahead right now and talk about scheduling a special meeting so that we can review it all together. So what's the consensus of the board on that? Okay, I see Mrs. Rosario waving her hand. Go ahead. Mrs.
Hi,
Rosario.
thank you. Yes, I had a question from earlier, or rather a comment from earlier. So I'm going to try to tie it in together with, I believe, what I understand to be the last question that you just asked. Okay. First, if there's any items on the workshop today that we do not get to, I believe at quick glance, Dr. Moore could probably bring maybe one or two of those to us tonight at our meeting. This is important for us to discuss. I think this is very important for us to come to consensus on. The second item that I have here is that I want to agree with Dr. Schiff with regard to the letter. I know that time is very much of the essence here, but I agree with the importance of this millage, and in hopes that the county commission will change their mind, essentially. I am very willing to come to a special meeting. I'm very willing to meet at 12 midnight. If you all need us to meet, I will be available at any time, even on Sundays. I know that I'm just wanted to verbally express that I will be available at any time. There are very, very smart board members working for the school district right now. It is not about Mrs. DeGresta and Dr. Moore that they couldn't put a letter together. That's fine. But I do agree that it is coming from the school board. And we are the ones that are asking for this letter to be drafted. I think that we ought to be able to review it. And if there's anything that we want added or taken away or anything like that, I think that we ought to be given the respect to have that final say. The other thing is with regard to the letter itself, again, I don't think that Mrs. DeGresta or Dr. Moore cannot craft a really good letter around statute, but I think it goes a little bit beyond just the statute interpretation. I think it actually needs to speak more to the very specific need of this district's budget process. When our budget begins and when our budget ends is not like any other organization. And the fact that we work a year in advance for the following year, it makes a big difference. You know, next year we're going to be faced with budget deficit because of COVID-19. And that's the year when we are hoping that this new millage would take place. It all ties in together. So I think that the letter needs to include some other very, very important facts about, you know, our budget process, the budget impacts very specifically, and the consequences that come after, you know, if it doesn't pass. You know, even waiting until November, what are the consequences of us waiting until November, and how does that impact us? I think that ought to reflect in the letter too, because nobody's really talking about that. We're just talking about whether we go in August or November. But if we go in November, how does that affect us? I think that needs to be written in the letter. With regard to the authorization of Dr. Moore, he gets paid quite a bit of money to be the CEO of this school district. And so he has my full support and authorization to move, you know, full speed ahead. However, he does have 5 bosses that I would expect that he would, you know, reach out to if there is a decision that needs to be made, that he would give us a call and say, hey, we need a special meeting because this is blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, if it's just consensus or whatever, you know, give us a call and say, look, this is what has just come up. And it's not about not being able to give him the authority, but this is a political move. This is a budget move. This is, you know, all kids first decision. And really, the buck goes through Dr. Moore, but ultimately it stops with us. So I want to make the right decision in all of this. I hope that I was taking notes. I don't know, Laura, did I answer your last question?
Oh, where I had suggested the 2 options of having Dr. Moore and Mrs. DeAgresta crafting the letter. 2 options would be them emailing the letter out to the board, getting feedback for that, and sending it back to them to, you know, recraft or perhaps put it into the letter. Or the second option would be they craft the letter, send it out to us, and we discuss the changes that we would like to see at a board meeting, a special meeting. So those are 2 options. And that's what I meant.
With the time crunch, yeah, so let me answer that one. With the time crunch, I will go with board consensus on this. If you all want to do it, you know, where we give him individual feedback, that's fine too. I find great learning out of communicating with you all together. You often have incredible feedback that, you know, I wouldn't even know what to ask if I didn't hear some of the feedback from you know, my fellow board members. And sometimes you don't know to ask something that you don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's often a learning process for me. If we don't have time for that learning process in this, I get it, I understand. But if we do, even if it's a 5-minute, 10-minute, you know, special meeting, then I would prefer that. So what do you all think?
Okay. Mrs. Justice?
I would agree. I think it's very important that we are aligned with this as a board. I think we're dealing with 2 separate issues. We have an issue of what appeared to me today, some county commissioners, a county administrator, a county lawyer, who really didn't have all of their information straight. I was, to be honest, quite surprised today when I heard that the county attorney did not realize what the 2-year millage and the 4-year millages were for and the difference between the 2, because he was making a recommendation about millages that we're able to levy and whether or not the county commission should move forward, and did not have that information ready. So I'm concerned about the oversimplification of our budget of our contract negotiations and a general lack of understanding, it seemed. I'm not surprised. It is complicated and it is very different, but I think we're only as good as what we know we don't know, because when we think we know and we make decisions based on a falsehood, that ends up being really bad for kids. So that's what I see that happened today. The letter is a separate issue for me. I don't, personally, I will support this board, and if you'd like to write a letter and give reasons why specifically, it is very important for our students and for Dr. Moore to have this passed, and I don't think it's been any surprise to the county commissioner or anyone else how important it is. And I sit here upon reflection of the Children's Trust millage and worry that perhaps me speaking out before somehow affected their decision-making today. It didn't seem like it shouldn't have been an issue for them to deliberate. And so when we get back to that very root situation of do we justify, if that's what we need to do what's best for kids, then let's do it, because I will do it. But just in general, as 5 women elected officials on this school board, we walked into a county commission meeting today where basically the CEO of our company was not what was some of his power and some of our power to do what's right for kids, knowing what we know and being as entrenched as we are, was taken away from us. And so when Dr. Moore says to look at pursuing legal action alongside the letter, I want the county commission to know that we are serious. I would like them to reconsider their decision they made today. I don't think that they have all the information, and if they need more information, I hope they ask for it. And I will beg them on behalf of our children, because that's what I'm willing to do for kids. But as an elected official, as a politician, which I don't often like to be, it's unacceptable what happened today. It was wrong, and I do think as strong, smart women fighting for these kids, we need to stand up and say, listen, we want to work together, but at some point we need to respect that we all have our jobs to do.
Okay, Dr. Moore?
Through the chair, my recommendation is I'll provide a letter to you this afternoon at this evening's meeting. It's not too hard to state what the statute states, to regurgitate everything we said in regards to the need. I think we've publicly shared that information. We could review facts within that particular letter, get your feedback for that this afternoon, have Mr. Gress ensure that it is legally sound and right, and forward it over in the morning and continue along the legal path at the same time. I think it's a very straightforward letter because the statute is straightforward within regards to this particular area. And we're just defining need is one thing, which I think we articulated in a passionate way this afternoon, and it fell upon deaf ears. So I think we just define what the statute says, directs them, the school board, to direct them to place it on the ballot, and no regard to the statute. That's not what was done.
Right.
So I think that's the appropriate action, is that we craft this letter, we move through this agenda. I'll have it ready for you this evening. We will provide feedback and continue along this path. Parallel path, I'm sorry. Here's a letter. If you choose to act upon it, great. This is the process that we're following in terms of pursuing it through the courts.
Nice. So I agree with you, Dr. Moore. I do think that it just really needs to state our legal rights to ask for it to be on the August ballot. And I think that we just went a long way around to try to say just exactly that. And that is basically all that letter needs to say, because that's where our authority lies, is with that statute. So what I'm hearing, board members, is that Dr. Moore and Mrs. Deargrust are going to work on that letter and have it for us tonight, and I will ask Mrs. Esplin to, under discussion, put on there that letter, or should we add that to action? We don't have to add that to action, do we?
It would be tonight.
Or just discussion?
With regard to the informational letter, I think it can be part of discussion. If you're looking to give some direction with regard to litigation, I would suggest that you put it on action.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just have that for discussion tonight. We'll approve it and give our feedback. Dr. Schiff does have a comment.
Yeah, a quick comment that just occurred to me, and I just started looking it up, but I don't know the answer. When are property taxes assessed in November? Is it before it or after the election? It's got to be after, because the election is in the beginning, right?
Can I answer that?
Because
Prior year.
how
Okay.
this goes affects how those property taxes are assessed.
Property taxes, I believe, are assessed in January, correct? And then the trim notices go out around the first week of August, and then the property tax bills go out around the first week of November.
So yeah, how this gets assessed is tied in an election year to a referendum like this. Again, I don't know the process, so I'm not speaking from knowledge here. But what we wouldn't want to miss is some of those deadlines if this referendum is tied to property taxes and the timing of that process.
My understanding, Dr. Schiff, what we're asking for this year would not affect anything from this year.
Okay.
Is that correct, Mr. Fagan?
Yes, ma'am, through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Mrs. Justice?
Yeah, I had a comment that I wanted to share, and then it flew out of my head when Mara was talking. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I apologize. Oh, this is what I wanted to mention. There was much talk today about voter turnout, and I thought it was really interesting. We were talking about voter turnout. But what happens in a primary election is it's a local election. This is a local issue. So when I started doing some history about why was this on an August election, voters who come out to vote in primary elections are normally informed about their local candidates and local issues. So bringing this in the August ballot, while I recognize voter turnout may be more in November, people that come to the ballot in August are generally more, they are there voting for a primary candidate to represent them in a general election. So we especially in advertising this to community members who are engaged and invested, they'll be paying attention in August. So I just wanted to make that comment. While I understand voter turnout, this is a very local issue, and that general election, as Dr. Adams spoke today, will be a volatile election and a national election with a lot of other things happening around it. And I really, we've always been kind of a grassroots organization. I mean, this is our time to go to our local constituency and talk to them about need. This is a relationship between the school district, the school board, the superintendent, our families, and our community members.
Thank you. Okay, board members, if you don't mind, I would like to take a 10-minute break. I want to get with Mrs. Diagresta and Dr. Moore to see if, or we could talk about it now, how much time you think it's going to take to draft that letter. And I know you're not going to have enough time from.
She wrote it in her head already. I literally watched it.
I know you will not have enough time between 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I would not think, to have it to us. So out of courtesy to get this drafted, do you need to be excused to go work on this now? Or do we want to take a break right now and you two work that out?
Perhaps Dr. Moore and Mrs. Diagresta could have a conversation about it while we take a break. I could
Yeah,
take a break, and then we could
absolutely.
just come back and restart and move from
Yep.
there.
Yep, exactly.
There's a hand.
Yes, Mrs. Rosario. You're on mute.
Yeah, there was a comment that was just made right now. I have a question before we take a break, and it might make or break the break. This might be for Mrs. Diagresta. I was under the impression that the last millage that was passed 4 years ago was set from August to August, or August to June 31st, right? June or July 31st. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. The school board had it placed on the August election, so the voters took action in August, but it's still a property tax, so it runs with the property tax assessment.
But if we go in November, do we lose September, October, November?
No, ma'am, no, ma'am. The property tax is assessed in January. Think of it, you have to separate your head from, you've got your school board fiscal year, and then you've got your property tax fiscal year, and they're two different fiscal years. A property tax, think of it like a calendar year, January to December, and then separate out, because we all automatically think fiscal year for school board of July 1 to June 30. A property tax is not on the same fiscal year as the school board. It's a calendar year, January to December.
Okay, so the question, then let me change my question. If we were not going to go for a millage this year, or to be in effect next year, right? If we took it off the table, hypothetically speaking, and we were not going for a millage, when would the current millage end?
June of
2021.
What's that date?
June 20.
June.
For our fiscal year, it would be June 30, 2021.
June 30, 2021.
But please understand that property taxes and this is the legal word, dribble in throughout the year. So while the assessment would end June 30, 2021, additional property taxes may still dribble in after that point if they've not been collected yet.
Okay.
They dribble in.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Mrs. DiAgresto, I just want to,
Yes.
I think about what precedent setting, and someone suggested to me, we have an excellent relationship with our county commission. I want to talk about this openly, Dr. Moore, Matt? We have an excellent relationship with our county commission. They've been great to us. We're one of the few districts that has a cost share for safety for SROs. In general, we've always had a really good understanding and relationship with our county commission. So I'm just not understanding why this happens.
Sorry.
And it concerns me because I think it sets a precedent. It sets a precedent where we give up power that we have, and I don't mean power like ego power. I mean just our ability to do our jobs, right? Statute gives us responsibility, but empowers us to do our jobs. I don't understand what happened today. And until we understand the why, I don't know that they will change their minds. So what was it? Because statute clearly says we can. They chose to not. Is it truly the sales tax issue? Is it being best by voters? Where does the responsibility lie with elected officials, county commissioner, school board, with that? But until we know why, I mean, we're going to send, I don't want to sue them. You don't want to sue them. I don't want to end our cost share for the SROs. That's more money we have to try to find out of our pocket to keep our kids safe. It felt like we were working as a team before. So we're at this moment where we're going to send them a letter. We're going to pursue legal action. Are we going to get the result we want? When the commissioner spoke to me today, and I respect him, he's a friend. I understand his position. He said the ultimate goal is getting the millage passed. Does this hinder our ability to get the millage passed in the future? I have to ask the questions now, right? The hard question. I'm going to be honest. It doesn't. Okay. Dr. Moore says he does not feel it does. Is it important enough as a school board, and only we can answer this, because pursuing the route we're pursuing could fracture the relationship in the future, right? We know that. It's not exactly like we're all going to sing Kumbaya. They're going to be a little annoyed with us. Well, they are. So how do we get back to being a team again? How do we get back to the place? How did we get here? I just don't know. So pursuing legal action, doing all of that, I think there's a chance they'll probably end the cost share with the SROs at some point in the next 5 years. Nobody else does it. We're very blessed and lucky that they do it. It gives us the ability to really step up security in our district. And I think parents and community members really appreciate our teamwork on that. Why is it so broken now? Have other county commissions? No, I don't know. I'm asking. it sets a precedent. When we did the charter school litigation, there were people who told us, and this is all open now because we've settled it, that doing what we did and sharing the pro rata, right, pro rata share of that 0.6 was going to have lasting ramifications, not just for us, but for the entire state. We set a precedent in doing that. There were those that told us to appeal the decision, to not have to share, and we made a decision as a board and said, we feel it's in the best interest of the community to share. And that set a precedent, but we knew we were. I guess the legal question is that, does this set a precedent? Will boards in the future have to try to pull back their ability to direct the county commission? Will, in 4 years, if none of us are around, will this be another question? And so really, if the ultimate goal is getting the millage passed, and the county commission said they want to pass a resolution to support us, we want to get the millage passed. I really believe the community wants to get the millage passed. They have always supported us, especially now when we realize how important teachers are. Is the path we're going down right now the best way to accomplish that? Do we take a break right now, and do we call our county commissioners individually? Does the superintendent get on the phone? Do we take the rest of the afternoon and we ask them to reconsider? Because we've had a conversation, maybe they've listened to it, and we really want to work as a team. And then we can move forward with sending a letter and making another decision tonight.
Okay. I see Mrs. Rosario wants to speak, but I don't think, it wasn't my understanding in the letter we were going to say we're going to seek legal in that letter.
No, but I will tonight, if we approve a letter, I will pose for action. I mean, the superintendent has said it. We've made a commitment to support him to do what he needs to do. He's made it very clear this is important.
But I think our next step would be the letter of just clarification of the law of what we know it to be. And you asked what happened today. I think there is a misunderstanding of how we interpret the law to how they're interpreting the law. And I think that's where it's lying today. And that's why I think it's important for Mrs. DeAgresta to clarify what our rights are and how we feel that, you know, the decision today was not within our rights. So that's my opinion. Mrs. Rosario.
Thank you. I heard the possibility of, after the letter, after the calls, after the emails, after the attempts, that maybe legal action may be needed. Not that would be the first course. That was my understanding of it. So I'm not ready to go take any legal action for anything right now. Right now, we have to try to appeal to our county commission and ask them to reconsider. Board members can write letters, community can write letters, emails, reach out to your county commissioners and ask them to reconsider. That's what we're gonna do. And if the community is behind us, the community can do the same thing. Everyone has free will and everyone can make that effort. I do not see this as a fractured relationship. I do not see this as a disconnect between our working relationship with the county commission and the school district, the school board, because they are fully in support of the millage. They have said it. They continue to support the school district. The only issue here was August or November. That had August or November should have absolutely nothing to do with whether they fully support us. It was just a matter of maybe one or two county commissioner. In this case, it was 3 out of the 5 county commissioner. Well, 4 out of the 5 county commissioners who actually voted for November instead of August. That does not show fracture for me. What I saw that was a fracture was a misunderstanding, and I did not see a misunderstanding of statute. I saw a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation of the reality of our budget and our budget process and the timelines, that's what I saw. A misunderstanding as to, well, this is for next year, so there's no immediate need. Therefore, let's put it on the ballot for November. That was what I understood. That's what I heard. That's what I understood. And that misunderstanding is why I am asking for this letter to not only be about statute, but to also include in there the importance and the understanding of why our budget process, our budget is not going in August, is not only about closing contract with teachers or CWA workers or union. This isn't about the unions. This is about everything else that needs to get done in the school district in a year in advance for us to plan for next year. And if we do not get approved in November, then what? Then what happens to our district in the future? What happens to our district next September, next August? That's what needs to be included in this letter as well. And that's why I don't see a disconnect in the relationship or a fracture. How did we get here? You know, I just don't know how this, I know exactly how we got here. I think that decisions from previous board, collective, not us, may have had impact on this. That's a guess. I think that the previous superintendent may have made some decisions. Maybe there's debt left over. Maybe there's, maybe the previous time they went for a millage, there might have been some stuff going on. I don't know. That's a guess on my part. But again, the question here isn't about their support because they fully support us. It is about when they are deciding. I don't think that they had the right to decide August or November. That came from a personal opinion where one county commissioner said, I would prefer November. That's what the county commissioner said. I would prefer November. Another one agreed, and that's how we got where we are today. We did not provide enough support to show why we needed in August, not November. And I think that's why our letter needs to show that support. Please reconsider because these are the reasons why August benefits the school district, not November.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Rosario. Mrs. Berenborg, Dr. Schiff, and then I'd like to try to wrap this up.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate as to what they're thinking.
Right.
But I do think, and I'll go back to what I said previously, I think they needed more concrete information. Not that it's their job to control what our thinking is. I think the reason why they needed more concrete information is what's the urgency on our behalf? Why are we so urgent with this? And I think that's the difference in what it's going to take to get this reversed.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Berenborg. Dr. Schiff.
Two quick things. I agree with Mrs. Justice that this is potentially controversial. While we may be arguing points of process or why we need it or why we don't, the fact is we are challenging the decision of an elected legal body, of an elected body, the county commission. It is potentially confrontational, whether or not our deliberations here convince us that they're not. So I agree with Mrs. Justice, and I don't want to downplay that. Secondly, I think that the argument that the county commission gave for why to push this to November wasn't, oh, gee, you don't really need it till then. It was voter turnout. They were concerned that a low voter turnout at the primary did not fully represent the population or the citizens of Vero Beach, and they wanted, rather than 30% of the voting eligible population weighing in, they wanted 80% weighing in, which is what they documented was historically the difference between who showed up at the primaries and who showed up in November. So I don't think the issue was, do we need it? It may have, part of it was that, because yes, they discussed the issue of, well, the current millage doesn't actually expire until June 2021. But their concern was that they expressed that as elected officials whose job it was to represent the voters of the county, they wanted as many voters as possible to weigh in. So I don't want to minimize that and say, well, they felt like we didn't really need it till November. I don't think that was the issue. And I think if we are going to address what they said, let's make sure that we get it right. If we have to go back and watch the tape, let's make sure that we properly represent what they said and what they didn't say, and not our interpretation of that. So, because I agree with Mrs. Justice, we have good working relationships in this county with other elected officials, with law enforcement. When we take on an issue that confronts the authority of any of those partners, it comes at a potential risk. And let's really think that through as we move forward. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't move forward, but I am suggesting we are not simply saying, hey, gee, you didn't understand. I think that's a mistake. They did understand. They just had a different assessment than we did. So let's be clear about that, and let's be very clear moving forward what are the benefits and the risks of the action that we take.
Okay. And I do agree with you, Dr. Schiff. I think the letter needs, it's a courtesy letter to reconsider new information is what it is. And that's the way I would like to see it written, is a courtesy letter to present new facts and information that they didn't have today or this morning. In no way do I want to diminish, we do have a fantastic working relationship with our county commission. And so I just, I'm very concerned when we start throwing out the words legal. No, let's see where we go with the letter, is my opinion, based on the new information, and present it to them and have it presented on Tuesday and ask, after we get the letter drafted and approved tonight, is Tuesday asked to be put back on the agenda based on what we have in the letter, and present it to them also in person. Are we good with that?
I have a question.
Yes.
What new facts or information will be presented that were not presented this morning?
I think that they need to really see, there was information that was read about statute that Dr. Moore read. I think there's information that Mrs. DeAgresta read, but I think they need to see those facts put down on paper so that they can really look into those and investigate those.
So just to be clear, just because they're going to go form the letter, so just to be clear, it's not new facts. We're not asking the county commission to reconsider based on new facts. We're just going to reiterate what was expressed this morning regarding statute and our position in a kind and friendly manner. And we're going to ask them to reconsider based on the information that we've already provided, but we're providing again. I want to be clear if there are new facts, because I don't want a county commissioner to be
Right.
able to come back and say, well, there were new facts and I changed my mind. That's not the case.
Well-
There are the facts and there aren't the facts. Let's just, I think what Maura said was spot on. Go to the tape. Watch what they said, because the only way is to understand the why and then to be able to speak to it. It's not our interpretation of what they understood or they didn't understand. We have presented information. We believe where we stand. Let's present that information again in writing, and let's ask them to reconsider. I'm comfortable with that. But any new information that would be shared would be something that, yeah, definitely, now I want the letter to come back, right, if there's new information. I don't know what that means.
Well, my question is, did we give it to them ahead of time in writing, the exact statutes that we were referring to today in public comment? Did we ever present that to them, or was that just something that we brought up during the meeting?
There was a staff recommendation.
I'm asking Mrs. DeAgresta.
And, Mrs. Zork, the statutes that I discussed today during the county commission meeting were all contained in the resolution, which had been provided to them ahead of time, yes.
Okay.
Yes, all of that statutory information was contained within
And
that
then,
resolution.
Dr. Moore, the statute that you read, was that provided ahead of time?
Same.
It was all in
the
there?
exact same
Okay.
statute. He and I were talking
Okay.
about the exact same statute.
Okay. All right. Point of clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, can I
Go ahead, Dr.
weigh
Schiff.
in for?
Go ahead, Dr. Schiff.
Yes? Um, Speaking of points of clarification, we went into the meeting believing that it was a yes or no vote. We went in saying this either will or will not be on the ballot in August. We didn't go in prepared to demonstrate or justify the difference between what happens if it goes on in August or if it goes in November. We were a little bit blindsided by that conversation. So whether or not it's new information, I'm not clear that we adequately presented the impact of the difference that it makes in August or in November because we never anticipated that question. It came kind of out of the blue. We thought we were going to justify and give evidence for a yes or no vote, not a yes but vote. So in that case, it may not be new information, but we didn't prepare arguments to speak to what turned out to be the vote. And I think that's something here that is what we're talking about may warrant clarification. There are financial impacts, there are budget and negotiation impacts, some of which got spoken to. But they got spoken to off the cuff when Dr. Moore was asked to address a question that he hadn't, forgive me for speaking for you, Dr. Moore is excellent on his feet, and I'm always impressed. But he was asked on the fly to answer a question about the impacts of delaying the millage vote until November that he hadn't had time to go back and fully reflect on, nor confer with Mr. Fagan about the financial impacts of that. And I think that's also something that we're discussing here, that we would like to give that information to the County Commission in a way that may not have been accurately or adequately presented this morning.
Go ahead.
Okay, through the chair. I will craft the letter. I think we were prepared to discuss the impact of August or November. That was clearly stated that there would be a question asked in regards to that, but as it was proposed or written, didn't think that's the way that was going to go, but, you know, as you said, Ms. Zork, we can't read the tea leaves. So I could craft the letter as requested, so it can be sent to the county commission, and then circle back based on the feedback from that particular letter.
Mrs. Justice?
I've said all I need to say, Mrs. Rourke. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you. So, I think we're playing on words here. What I'm hearing is Dr. Schiff said there was information that we probably could have shared that wasn't shared because we weren't prepared to go in that direction. So to me, when we craft that letter, that is new information that we need to include in there, correct?
Yes, and as Dr. Moore said, yes, we were aware this was an issue, and Dr. Moore spoke well to it. But I'm not sure that we were, at least I will speak for myself, I wasn't as aware it would become the issue. And so while others may have been, and there may have been more information than I specifically focused on, and I will defer to Dr. Moore's judgment in this. If he feels that was adequately represented, I'm good with that. I focused on the yes/no question, not the when question, but others may have addressed it differently.
Right. Okay, board members, let's take a 10-minute break, and then Dr. Moore and Mrs. DiAgresta will discuss crafting the letter, and we'll come back in 10 minutes, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to call this workshop back to order. We took a short break. It is 2:40. It is our superintendent's workshop, and at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moore so he can present the items that he has on the agenda today.
All right, thank you, School Board Chair. Just to clarify, we did take a quick break. We will be developing a letter that clarifies our position and understanding that we could provide to the Board of County Commissioners. We will have that ready for your review and endorsement this afternoon. Once again, the letter will clarify our position and understanding, interpretation of statute, as well as the impact that not going in August will have on us as a system. And we will ask them to reconsider the decision that was made today. I think that captures the conversation that we just had, putting a good faith offer to them, clarifying both on our interpretation of statute, which we believe is straightforward, as well as the impact that it will have, and send it over to them, asking them to hear that item again next Tuesday, offer me the opportunity to clarify any questions, concerns that they may have. Just want to be upfront and honest. The Board of the County Commissioners have been very supportive of our work, very supportive of me, very encouraging to me as I have met with them, understanding that some did have an opportunity in my evaluation to ensure that as many people had the opportunity to vote on this item as possible, all items, but never standing against or in opposition of us as a system. I think their desire, David Moore speaking, was to ensure that we maximize the opportunity for voters. So this wasn't something that I didn't think was going to happen. My goal is to appropriately and vigorously market and advertise to have as many people come out to vote whenever this is, while at the same time affording me the opportunity as the CEO of this organization to effectively run and operate the district. If I didn't effectively communicate that this morning, then I apologize. My goal was to represent each of you and the system and our children and our teachers in a way that clearly defined the importance and priority based on our definition of statute. We will restate those in writing so they cannot be misinterpreted. Mr. Brown has been very supportive, open, and honest and transparent with me in this process, so I don't feel as if something was presented to me backhanded or, oh my goodness, this is coming out of nowhere. I anticipated a favorable outcome with a brief conversation regarding that. Unfortunately, it was bigger and deeper than I initially anticipated, but I don't want to mislead anyone that this was completely out of the blue. Not the case. Mr. Brown has been very upfront and honest with me, as I have been with him, and the outcome was the outcome that it was today. So we don't agree. It doesn't mean they're not great people. We just don't agree.
All right, we have about 6 items to go through. Dr. Schiff, did you have a comment? And
Yeah,
so we
it's
can
very
move
quick.
on.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Moore. I appreciate that, because first and foremost, this is not about sour grapes. This is about clarification, and I appreciate you also clarifying that. Secondly, will you be bringing that, putting that on the agenda tonight as a discussion item or an action item?
As a discussion item, unless I am told different, that's my intention.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Moore?
All right, thank you. Looking forward to having some meaningful conversation with a number of items as we do the business of the school system of Indian River County. I will have Mr. Fagan present the first 2 items. If you do not have any questions or concerns, Mr. Fagan will move on to the second item. The first is the annual fire safety, casualty, and sanitation report. The second is the purchase of new Chromebook laptops. Mr. Fagan.
Yes. Any questions on the annual safety report? Just a short note, this is to simply approve the inspections. The board is not approving any items that were in violation. They're just approving that the inspections were done. Moving on, there's a purchase item for the purchase of Chromebooks. This is an item in order to replace the Chromebooks that we passed out during the virus. It's approximately for 5,200 Chromebooks that are going to be purchased through a vendor that
I had a comment.
that
Okay.
we
Mrs. Barenborg?
Yeah, I put it in comment, but I guess it wasn't recognized. Yeah, I do have some concern. I know we're just approving that it was done, but I do want to highlight a couple things that I think my fellow board members have seen before, and it's frustrating to me to see again. I know I dealt with this when I was a principal, but I really think that it should be emphasized how important this is. When you read through those inspections, you see consistently prop doors open.
Mm-hmm.
You see that that's a fire hazard. It's also a security hazard. We see extension cords continuously being used in classrooms when they're not supposed to be used. And it's over and over and over again, you see this. Monthly fire extinguisher checks. That's something custodians should be doing every single month, and if not, should be part of their evaluation. We even had expired extinguishers. Should not happen on a school campus. Dust on vents. At this day and age, with everything we've been going through, those are things that should have been taken care of before an inspection.
What?
Even locks on egresses. I have concerns about that. I understand all the other ones that we have with repairs and things like that. Things break, you have to repair them, and we get cited for it. I get that. But those things that I mentioned are things I think principals need to be extremely, extremely aware of, and how dangerous that situation can be.
Mrs. Berenborg, I'm sorry, it broke up. What was the last item that you had said?
Locks on egresses.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Through the chair, I 100% agree, and I think as we begin to transition over the summer, returning to a open school environment, whatever that will look like, there is an opportunity to recondition staff's behaviors and process and procedures in order to ensure we're continuously evaluating the safety and reality of our school environments. Simple systems that are adhered to, and it is both supported in terms of development and clearly defining it as being an expectation, but at the same time, as we visit schools, yes, we will be in classrooms observing the instruction, but at the same time, as that high school principal in me, always going through that safety inspection. And I always say, as I am walking to a classroom, I'm evaluating everything else. And there are multiple opportunities on a daily basis to ensure principals are walking to classrooms and conducting safety checks with the same thing with assistant principals, custodial staff. We will have those systems in place, and you'll see a better report next time around.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next item is the purchase of Chrome laptops. This is the purchase of approximately 5,200 replacement laptops for the laptops that we passed out during the coronavirus. The agenda item is for $1.8 million. The budget that we have allocated for this is approximately 1.6, but we wanted to have a little cushion in the budget in case we wanted to buy some more if we needed. As a comparison between these laptops compared to maybe you might find some in the marketplace, online, and et cetera, these are just a little bit different. These are more educational grade. They're a little bit heavier duty. They're not your normal commercial grade. Also, when they arrive versus buying one from a retail outlet, these will arrive pre-configured to fit with our domain and our network. That means basically we open them up, turn them on, they are ready to go. Otherwise, they'd have to be configured. They come with our logo etched on them. That costs a little extra. They have a 3-year warranty and a 3-year extended battery warranty. This costs a little extra. Also, the processor in these units is a little bit faster than your standard retail units, therefore it's faster for the students and the teachers. It also comes already tagged piece for property, for inventory, so therefore it will already be assessed in our inventory. It also comes with $25,000 of 9 days of training that Dell will offer to our teachers.
Okay. Mrs. Berenborg?
Yes, I'm the one that pulled this item this week and asked for clarification as to the cost and the breakdown. Because if you go to a local or a big box store, you can find that same Chromebook for $189. So I appreciate the fact that you gave us the breakdown of all that, because I think Joe Public, and I've had Joe Public ask me, you know, why are we paying so much more per unit? And also, could you please let everyone know how hard we're going to work to try to get back the laptops that we have out? Because I know, you know, that's taxpayer dollars out there. And so I think we need to address that as well as before we decide on spending more money on computers.
Through the chair, we will be conducting a return of laptops in a phased process. Students will have the opportunity the 18th through the 24th, not next week, but the following week, to return devices if they're absolutely not in use. We will be pushing out a very innovative and creative way to build endurance and stay connected to teaching learning over the summer. Those laptops would be required to be used during that time. And then as we return to school, we will ask students to return those devices when we have a clear understanding that the devices we're returning to a traditional school environment. It will not be a blended. There's still a lot of decisions that need to be made based on a reality that's yet to be defined. So we do have a phase-in plan. We do have documentation as to who has these laptops, and we will collect them in a way that ensures we're not taking technology out of the home for children. We did receive a donation at our last board meeting, which will ensure up to $60,000, which is roughly, I want to say, just right around 300 laptops, give or take. That's probably a little bit too high. That we'll be able to leave laptops in homes for students, in which we would be absolutely removing technology. That's not a decision we want to make.
Thank you. Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Dr. Moore, because I was going to reflect on Mrs. Barenborg's comments suggesting that getting them back reflected good stewardship of taxpayer money, where I would actually argue that leaving them in homes that need them and giving them access to technology in ways we have not provided in the past is actually what we're charged with doing, and is actually a good way of using these resources in addition to the new ones that we're able to get. And I think as we move forward into what is undoubtedly going to be new ways of using technology for teaching and learning, the better we can equip our students, the more innovative and creative and efficient we'll get to be in the teaching and learning process. That, though, wasn't my original question when I wrote comment. My original question was, in this documentation, I think both for here and I'm pretty sure it's for tonight, this details the cost for a single Chromebook. Can you clarify for me why this is listed here as per unit rather than the total amount that we'll be approving tonight?
Through the chair, this item is to approve the contract to engage with UDT to buy the units at $320, whatever the price is on here. The agenda item is for up to purchasing $1.6 million. That'll allow us to issue the purchase order up to a maximum of $1.6. They simply gave us a quote per unit. We just tell them how many units we want in the PO.
But isn't there, forgive me for speaking out of turn, and I get that this is per unit. That then required me, for example, or a taxpayer or somebody in the community to multiply this out by the number of units that we're requesting in order to get the total amount that we're spending. That, to me, was kind of a confusing way of doing it. I understand your explanation, but I was looking here at a per unit cost with the clarifications you sent earlier this week as per Mrs. Barenborg's question, that then you said it was 5,100 something units times this $323.70 per unit got us to the 1.8 million. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, through the chair.
Yeah, it would just be helpful to have all of it worked out and have the legwork done rather than having to sort it out.
Yes, ma'am, we'll correct that moving
helpful.
forward. Through the chair, yes, ma'am, we'll make that correction going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Justice?
This is one of those interesting areas where it's quite a bit of money. The school district needs to approve the purchase. As a school board member, am I second guessing the superintendent's judgment by questioning the need, right? So I'm always kind of, trying to find my place as a school board member, because Dr. Moore wouldn't be asking for them if he didn't need them or his staff felt that we needed them. So I understand that part of it. The other part of me, the taxpayer, says, okay, we had 10,000. We gave out X number. How many do we anticipate getting back? Is this these are all the questions, right? Is this necessary? Is it necessary now? Why? What will learning look like in the future in Indian River County? are we confident that this is the learning platform that we'll continue to use in this way? That we want, that laptop carts and the way that we have used technology within our classrooms has been the highest, best use of those dollars. Because I remember Mrs. Berenborg asking before with instructional materials and different things, you know, are we spending money in the best way to accomplish the goals? So really it's a question of Dr. Moore. As a taxpayer, I question the decision. As a school board member, I want to trust your judgment.
Through the chair, I think the answer is absolutely 100% without doubt. This moves us closer to a one-on-one initiative, ensuring that students have technology both in their home versus to be supported while in the classroom, the design and development of 21st century learning. Prior to taking this role, I was involved in a project, a middle school redesign project, where we were working with two other large systems, the first, the second, and the fourth largest systems in the nation, to work together to redesign what that middle school experience looked like. And in the midst of that work, we conducted a opportunity for students to come in a confined space by themselves and just share what they're frustrated with. And the number one share by students is teachers ask them to do assignments at home, and they don't have the technology to do so. So therefore, they have the heart, they have the desire, they have the will, but they don't have the tools at their home. And to realize that as a impediment to a child's learning, I think it is our responsibility to ensure that all students have the tools that they need to support their own learning. And I think what we have learned over the last several months is, if we're really to develop a 21st century learning environment in our schools, it needs to be consistent with the technology that they have in their home to do those lessons. And as we do a Canvas lesson, or we use certain platforms to integrate and challenge students' thinking and use technology as tools to solve problems, it can't be solely taking place within the confines of the classroom, but supported at the home. So I think this investment moves us significantly closer and faster to that being a reality. And at the same time, it affords us the opportunity to be ready when students return. When laptops come back, they need to be wiped, they need to be cleaned, they need to be sanitized, they need to be reloaded, they need to be placed back into the carts. And it was easy to rip them out with cutting and scissors, and I was doing that myself at Vero Beach Elementary, trying to keep up with the line. But it's not that easy to put them back in and tie them back in. So we'll be able to receive devices as school year starts, while at the same time not impeding the teacher's ability to continue to use those devices in their classroom. But great question.
Thank you. Mrs. Berenborg?
Yes, I want to ensure my board members two things. One, I am not questioning the superintendent's judgment on what we need to purchase. I think that we wound up being in a really good place because of the number of laptops that we had compared to other districts, and to compare to even the charter schools here in town. I know that there were several that wish they had laptops to give to all the kids like we did. I don't question that at all. And I also want to say the second point is, I don't question having it in kids' hands that need it. That's not a problem for me at all. What I do want to say publicly is that people question the costs of things. And I think we're in the job of education. We need to educate people when we're spending money on something. And so when you see the cost of something that's $189 at Best Buy, and we're approving it for $329 instead, people want to know, why are we spending so much money on something? And that's why I brought it forward.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Berenborg. Mrs. Rosario?
Yeah, when I buy a computer at Best Buy, which I haven't in years because I have an Apple computer, and I just find that Apple computers last longer. I've had my Apple laptop since 2012, and it is working as good as it did on day one. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because maybe we might save money in the long run if we start transitioning ourselves from PC to Apple even in some schools. I mean, I think that'll provide us with some cost savings. But when I used to buy a computer at Best Buy, it was just the computer itself. It didn't include some of the software. It didn't include Microsoft, Suite or Word or, Excel or maybe PowerPoint. And what I've noticed here on this invoice is that we have some of these extra services that are also included. So I can see where those extra charges brought it up from $295 to $323. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there as a thought to the last comment that was made. But I'd like to ask either Dr. Moore or Mr. Fagan to just speak publicly a moment, because I haven't heard it yet. The attached handout, it says School District of Lee County, November 2007. I've read through it, and I would just ask if you could publicly explain why this is attached for the public's understanding, and how it relates to this request for approval for us.
Through the chair, we're basically piggybacking on this contract with this county to make this purchase. They already have a contract with the company, and we're just piggybacking on that purchase.
So for the public who may not know, piggybacking means that we are essentially not reinventing the wheel, that we are using their verbiage and maybe their contract for our purposes. Is that correct?
Through the chair, absolutely correct.
Perfect. Do we then at some point need to rewrite it in our own language, or does it remain this way in our files forever and ever?
Through the chair, it remains in this format. We were basically utilizing their contract to execute this purchase.
Okay, thank you so much. So I understand piggybacking. What I, just for clarification purposes, maybe for public records purposes, is there a way that we can, I've seen this before, I've seen us piggyback items before. What I have not seen us do is actually label it as a piggyback item or something like that. For public notice, just as a side, is it possible to label some of the things that we're piggybacking as a piggyback item?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. We can do that moving forward. Yes, ma'am.
All right. It was just a question that I had. Also, this for Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore, can you talk a little bit about Title I schools and Title I funds as it relates to computers and laptop purchases, tablet purchases for in-class? Just because the district is purchasing all of these Chromebooks, does this eliminate the possibility of Title I schools or other schools to use some of their funds to supplement laptops in their school for their purposes?
Through the chair, it doesn't impede their ability to have flexibility in the spending of those school site funds that are provided through Title I. But as a system, we will have checks and balances to ensure that that money is being spent to maximize the resources, performance, and support provided to students.
So, whereas most of our, I'm guessing, maybe middle elementary and up students could use a laptop, although nowadays we have, pre-K students knowing how to manipulate a computer and a laptop. Have we had any discussions about purchasing iPads or tablets for the lower levels? So, clearly we're not going to ask them to turn on their laptop when they're in pre-K and kindergarten, but to be able to use a tablet for learning centers or learning activities, where has the conversation been in those around those grade levels.
Through the chair, over the last several months, we've been challenged to explore technology being used for all grade levels, pre-K and above. So the answer to your question is absolutely. We've had those conversations and continue to challenge ourselves to use that technology to support home learning, as well as when we return to a traditional setting to enhance the experience for children of all ages.
Okay. I'm happy to support this. I just don't want us to be wasteful. Although I do understand the need for technology now more than ever. I don't also want us to forget about our little ones in the district. And I also want to throw in there that I am a 150% supporter of play for our little ones. I do not want technology to replace their playtime, but I also don't want us to forget those grade levels, pre-K, kindergarten, even first grade. But thank you for this.
Thank you. Mrs. Rosario, I'm going to speak as a grandmother from a kindergartner that's in the district. The classrooms, they do have the computers in there, and on rotation, they do utilize the computers, and I know that he is hopefully at home today doing his iReady and his MyOn and the other programs that he's been able to utilize. And he's in kindergarten, and it's amazing because he's been able to teach me, and then whenever my fifth grader had a question, sometimes he had the answer to it because they know and they've been introduced to that within our classrooms within the district. So I wanted to speak to that as a grandmother, seeing it with my grandson, that we are making sure that our kindergartners use that. And for him, I've tried to introduce puzzles and other games, but his generation, his idea of play is playing a puzzle game on the computer. I can say that they are definitely getting the fun time with the computers also, and I think we're doing a really good job, and I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that. So at this time, we're going to move on to a different item.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Fagan. The next two items will be relatively straightforward. Mr. Teskey is here to answer any questions if you have them. One deals with the Storm Grove Middle School restroom renovation. The other are roof replacement at various schools, Beachland, Osceola, Rosewood, and Storm Grove, Sebastian River High School. Mr. Teskey, I don't know if oh, okay. We weren't proactive with the glove
Alrighty.
installation.
So the rule is, it's changed, it's not 10 anymore, it's went up, right? Mm-hmm. 10. Okay, recommendation, okay.
I was in Home Depot, there were like 30,000 people. Sorry.
Right.
Good afternoon, Chairman Zork, board members, Dr. Moore, hello. I am here to cover two agenda items, the first being Sebastian River Middle School restroom renovations, and the second being roof replacements and projects at 4 locations. Our first topic, Sebastian River Middle renovations. The purpose of this project is to renovate the aging boys and girls restrooms at Sebastian River Middle. The scope of the work includes replacement of sinks, faucets, toilets, and partitions. We will be applying a new epoxy floor. The East Boys restroom, as well as the East and West Girls restrooms, will be addressed in this project. We already addressed the West Boys restroom, if you remember, with the single point of entry project that we completed this past year. The board-approved project is fiscal year 19-20 in the current 5-year capital plan. The cost of the project is not to exceed $95,000 $21.71, which includes the proposal amount of $76,017.71 with an owner added contingency amount of $19,004. Bill Bryan and Associates Incorporated was the lowest of three quotes in accordance with School Board Policy 6322. The scheduled work is to begin board approval to be completed by August 1st. I will stand by for any questions.
Okay. Board members, any questions? No. I think it's good work that we're
I have a
we're
question.
trying to get this done before the first of the year, so thank you for being on top of this. Mrs. Rosario?
Thank you. I couldn't find my button to put in comment too quickly. It's definitely needed. I'm happy that we are going to have this done before the school year begins. My question is, how did we make the decision to begin in these bathrooms and not other schools? Like, how do we process through the conversations of which schools have priority or need priority over others?
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. The Freshman Learning Center, resembling Sebastian River Middle School, is a Goman Fletcher architectural style school. The FLC received bathroom renovations about 10 years ago, so Sebastian River Middle School was overdue. Just for equity purposes, we did have to remodel one bathroom at Sebastian River Middle School due to the single point of entry. We added a staff bathroom to the front entry. So with that one renovation, we needed to finish them at Sebastian River Middle School, the other three. Yes, ma'am. These are
I'm sorry,
included.
I don't understand. Just because we had to add one, we had to fix the other three?
Yes, ma'am. We are replacing sinks, toilets, fixtures, making sure they are compliant, ADA compliant, the partitions, the doors. We've had graffiti problems. We've had vandalism problems in our bathrooms. The epoxy floor will be more durable for the daily use. And they're funded from the 5-year capital plan.
And where is Oslo Middle School in all of this?
Oslo
Where do
Middle.
they fall?
So as far as Oslo Middle School, we do have summer projects scheduled for them. Their projects are more in line with chiller replacements and pump and building automation this summer within the 5-year capital plan. We are also beginning works for their access control system. Adding a bathroom project, we would work with the principal in the spring to assess their bathrooms for age, and we would add them into the capital budget.
Okay.
Mr. Tusky, the 5-year capital plan, could you provide that to the board members? I know that we've, typically we get those on an annual basis. When do we get the next one?
For the past 3 years, we have brought them to the board in September for review, workshop them, and then approve them in October.
Okay.
So we will take the guidance of the board and Dr. Moore, but statistically, historically, it's been September, October.
So, Dr. Moore, could you have that sent back out to the board members just so that we could re-review it, and just because I do remember seeing these renovations on that. So we'll get that sent out to the board members, okay? The 5-year capital plan?
Absolutely.
And through the chair, there will be all the projects listed for, let's say, Oslo Middle School. Everything that we have budgeted for this current year will be there.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. If there are no further questions on the bathroom renovation, I'll move on to the roofing projects at various schools. Beachland, Osceola, Rosewood, and Sebastian River High School. All roof replacement projects are identified in the 2018 district-wide roof condition assessment report provided by REI Engineers. Contracts are being awarded in accordance with the Brevard County Board invitation to bid 19-44B-SH for roofing services. Tech Systems, Hamilton Roofing, Atlas Apex Roofing, and Belmac were all contacted to provide bids. All projects are being funded from previous and current capital budgets. Beachland Elementary, Tech System was the low bidder. Osceola Magnet, Rosewood, and Sebastian River High School were Hamilton Roofing. I'll stand by for questions.
Okay. Board members, do we have any questions to this? think it's very self-explanatory, and thank you for the briefings that we get ahead of time for this. But go ahead, Mrs. Justice.
Thank you. I didn't put in comment. I apologize. When we all went out together to do the Teacher of the Year celebration, it was a rainy day. And we got to experience what a lot of our students experience sometimes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Wet feet and water everywhere. And when you only have one pair of sneakers for school and they get wet, and then you have to sit in them all day, and then when you get up in the morning, I don't know who's gotten their sneakers wet lately, but they're still wet in the morning, it stinks, right? And students shouldn't have to worry about those things. So some of these things are things that I think are somewhat long overdue. So I'm glad that we continue to move through them, because when I visit schools in the next year, I hope that this idea of water everywhere, pouring through walkways, all of those things, if we're not, Dr. Moore, I will ask you, the next time that it pours outside, I hope that every maintenance team is out at every school looking at where that water is going, because you know, we deal with a lot of water in Florida, and it definitely is a safety issue for our children, and it's a health concern.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. There are no further questions, Chairman Zork?
I think that's it. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Teskey. Thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Good seeing
Chesky.
you.
Thank you all. Good seeing you all, too.
Next to the podium is our Deputy Superintendent, Mr. Bass, who will be providing a review of revised benefits terminal pay leave policy. This was part of the negotiation and signing of our contract with our teachers. In the midst of that agreement, we provided an opportunity to review, update, and bring this policy for the board's consideration. Mr. Bass will provide this presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Dr. Moore said, this was brought up through negotiations, and it was something that IRCEA wanted to look at and possibly put into contract, but I knew what their proposal was different from our policy, and so we felt that it needed to be addressed policy-wise if we did anything. So we then took a look to see what the advantages would be to alter the policy, the terminal pay policy, which is going to be policy 3420 for instructional staff and 4420 for non-instructional staff. You know, the benefits of this proposal that we're putting forth to you is it's going to help us retain quality employees. It's going to provide an incentive for employees who want to stay in School District of Indian River. Ultimately, it's going to improve employee attendance. It will also decrease the number of subs that are in our classrooms with our students and decrease the pay that we have to budget for substitutes. And it gets us closer to, and I say closer, not ahead, but closer to like districts and also some of our neighbors. You know, we are in the competitive field of attracting and keeping good employees, so we want to take every advantage we can. The cons of this is there's not a fixed cost to it. It's going to fluctuate year to year depending upon your number of employees that you have who may be leaving. You know, if you look at the historical data over the past 4 years, I could safely say, and I think Mr. Fagan put it on the slide, you know, we're looking at about a $60,000 increase, you know, anywhere from 10 to 12% depending on what it is for the year. My experience in doing terminal pay is it varies. You may have a real bad year, but then you make up for it a couple of years down the road with a real slim year. So that is our feelings on the policy, and you know, would like for your consideration to set a date for public hearing for this policy tonight at tonight's board meeting.
Okay, thank you. We have comment, let's see, sorry, let's see. Oh, Mrs. Barrenborg.
Yes, I know a lot about this because I stayed in St. Lucie County for a couple extra years, even though there was a very enticing job. But when I realized that I was going to lose a lot of my money by leaving before that 13th year, I definitely reconsidered. And I think that we're in the situation where we need our teachers that have been with us a long time, that are highly qualified, and we need them to stay, and I think it's a great incentive. I know it was for me.
Okay. Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, I want to support the proposal, which I appreciate the data. I appreciate how you put that together, Mr. Bass, and similar to what Mrs. Barenborg has said. As evidenced by our presentation to the County Commission this morning, we are looking for every possible route we can to attract and retain great teachers. And if this helps us do that for what is really relatively minimal cost, but enables us to give teachers something they want, that encourages them to stay in the district, I'm all for it.
Okay. So I'm encouraged by this when I hear the word that you think that it will help us with the substitutes, because I know that having a substitute comes in, it takes a couple of days to get that learning back on track. So that's something I can appreciate from seeing the past 3 years, is trying to find come up with different solutions to go against that issue that we've had over the last few years. So I appreciate that on here. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Bass.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Next item is going to be presented by Ms. Dampier. Very excited to bring this item. Her team and her committee have been crafting this item for the past several months. It is the student code of conduct, and to present the exciting minor enhancements, new look, new feel, student first approach, Assistant Superintendent Ms. Dampier.
Good afternoon, board members and Mr. Moore. As Dr. Moore said, we're very excited to share with you the work that has been done with our code of conduct. Very pleased that Dr. Moore, as he stated before, he charged us with, of course, an overall overhaul of the student code of conduct. And we really wanted to make sure that it was student-focused. And we look at more of the preventions and interventions instead of being punitive, and instead of it being disciplined in a way that we're looking at consequences. So we want to be proactive instead of reactive. The why. Our why is that when we keep talking about the belief systems, and the last time we talked about the strategic plan and how we want to tie our beliefs to that plan, we want to tie our beliefs to the code of conduct as well. We believe student success is driven by climate and culture, and that's inside the classroom. And I know when we're doing our impact reviews and doing walks, we're looking at the culture of the classroom as well. So that's important, which begins with clear expectations. So what are the expectations that we have for our students? What are the expectations we have for our teachers, as well as for our administrators? All students should have a positive learning experience. We believe this in the classroom that motivates regular attendance as well as engagement with the curriculum, because we know if our students are there and we design engaging lessons for our students, they will be a part of the learning, which is what we want. And our responsibility is to provide, as stakeholders, is to provide appropriate behavioral and social emotional prevention strategies and interventions. And that's what the focus of this new student code of conduct is all about. This is just a timeline, a detailed timeline of the work that has been done by all the stakeholders, which consisted of our work groups, different work groups, our student advisory council, as well as district staff. This is more of a detail, but this is more of an overview of the work of that previous slide, which talks about we publicly noticed it, as well as held several work sessions with our committee members. because we wanted that feedback and we wanted them to, to be a part of this new process. As well as we worked with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, as well as, due to COVID, there was some editorial work that needed to be done. And we wanted additional feedback from those changes that we made, where we held a Teams meeting with the committee members on April 30th, and they gave us some more feedback because, as you know, this is still in draft form. So we're taking all the feedback and we're adding that feedback before we bring the final copy to the board. Very excited about the new changes. If you look throughout the Code of Conduct, very excited that we're going to be teaching our students and providing examples of successful behaviors for them. So many times, the students, we expect them to know something, but if we don't teach it, model it, and show them what it's like, then how do we expect them to be successful at the behaviors? We also have enhanced information regarding the progression of tiered interventions. Of course, in our last Code of Conduct, we just listed Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. We wanted to make sure our teachers knew, what does a Tier 1, what are we doing at Tier 1? What does that instruction look like for the behavioral portion of it? So we gave them examples, specific examples that they could use. Of course, they can come up with their own, but we wanted to give them, equip them with the tools so they can utilize that on day one, like a new teacher or even an experienced teacher. What does Tier 1 look like? We also wanted to ensure that the alternative to out-of-school, our ALTOS program, functions as a true alternative with focus on tiered interventions planned for reentry to the school. So we want to make sure that our students are provided with behavioral interventions when they come back, and when they come back, there is a plan before they actually go to the classroom, where they're meeting with their parents, they're meeting with their counselors, they're meeting with the success coach that we'll have on board, as well as an administrator, to welcome them back and to agree upon how do we handle the situations that got them, that could have led to some of the behaviors that, how they got to the ALTOS program. We're very excited about, we want to set our students up for success and provide that counseling for them as well. We also wanted to make sure that this was our improved readability and format. Our previous Code of Conduct was more like a book per se. We wanted to make it user-friendly visually. We wanted to streamline the document where you could just look at different topics and be able to go to that particular area. And we reorganized the content and aligned with the African American Achievement Plan. There were areas in the African Achievement Plan that talks about how we were going to review the discipline procedures in the Code of Conduct. That's what we did. Also, it talked about the different action steps where we're going to do a PD series. We're actually going to train our teachers, our coaches, our success coach, our administrators, all of the stakeholders, so we're all on the same page about the behaviors, the interventions that should be utilized in the classroom. We really want to set our stakeholders, our teachers, and our students up for success, as well as the support systems that are in place as well.
Before you move on, it looks like we have 2 board members that might have questions. Mrs. Berenborg?
Oh, I can wait till the end. I was just going to thank the team and make a comment.
Okay.
That's okay.
And when you're doing this work, you want to learn from the experience, and what are some lessons learned from this whole entire process? We wanted to make sure that there was a need for a more positive focus. When you looked at it, it was all negative. I felt like it was like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. We want to be able, just like in your home, you want to tell the kids and talk to them in a more positive light and tell them what you expect. So we put in some student success through culture and climate work that we're going to be doing with our stakeholders, and it's a less punitive outlook in the code. There's greater focus on prevention and interventions, which is positive behaviors. We want to really focus on the positive behaviors and look at that Tier 1 core instruction. We look at it for the academic portion of it. We need to make sure we have a solid for our Tier 1 with the behavioral side as well. So we're going to be doing a lot of training throughout the summer, as well as preparing the teachers prior to school starting, as well as throughout the year. We want to make sure that we set them up for success. We also know that there needs to be a need for exemplars. What does it look like? Classroom strategies for teachers. So the professional development is, what does that look like in the classroom? how are we going to coach and model those strategies for our teachers? And we are going to do that with the PD series that we're providing, as well as teach specific behaviors to our students. We assume a lot of our students know these behaviors, but we got to teach them, and we got to model it. We can also model these behaviors for our students as well. We also are going to provide trainings for our behavior strategies and interventions for our counselors, our administrators, our teachers, as well as our district staff that will be supporting the schools as well. So we're all on the same page, we all speak the same language, and we all know what Tier 1 and Tier 2 and 3 interventions look like. And then another lesson learned was the need for the streamline the communication, and that was the revisions to improve readability, and that was the reformat. We wanted to make it easier to read. And with that, we also would like to thank our Code of Conduct Committee, as well as the Superintendent Student Advisory Council and the ESC and Student Services staff, as well as I'd like to thank the board. I was able to talk to some of you in depth about the changes and really go through and talk about some of the exciting, I think, strategies that we're going to be able to provide for our students to have a more positive culture in their classroom to learn.
Just want to echo the acknowledgements of thanks. I've had the opportunity to be on some email exchanges between the committee, Ms. Dampierre, Dr. Parandozzi. Great collegiality and input has been put into the development of this document. So I just wanted to acknowledge that this is a collective effort that has produced a significantly refined document to really to move us forward in a student-first approach in developing ourselves as a system that ensures students have every opportunity to identify appropriate behaviors that lead to success. Very proud.
Thank you. Mrs. Barrenborg, do you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to everybody that worked on this and gave input, because it's a delightful change. It's very kids-focused, which I appreciate. It reminds me a lot of when you go through Kids of Hope training, the very first thing they teach you about is not every child understands rules at school that you just assume, adults assume they should know, because maybe they weren't taught the same in their home, or they have different rules in their home. So I think the teaching kids behavior part was a really great piece to put in this and include in this. And also that PD for teachers to understand that specific thing, that you can't just assume kids know right from wrong. So I appreciate that very much, and thanks for being so positive for kids.
Thank you. Dr. Schiff?
Yes, 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 and yes. When I hear you say things like we're shifting our approach towards prevention and intervention rather than being punitive or punishment, this is like music to my ears. This is the work I've done for the last 10 or 15 years. What I especially appreciate about this is it demonstrates a values-driven approach and a belief-driven approach, which is consistent with how we are redesigning our strategic plan. So what I see happening with this team and under Dr. Moore's leadership is the development of a very holistic approach in everything that we do, driven by a set of values and a set of core beliefs that informs every single document that comes out of this district, that informs every way that we interact with each other and with kids and with teachers. And we're moving away from this notion of isolated systems and structures into one overarching approach. And there's a Yiddish word, I could not be more delighted to see this approach and see how this is turning out. I'm going to give some specific acknowledgments to some team members later this evening. I'll do that in the business meeting when we formally approve this. So I echo the sentiments of my fellow board members and Dr. Moore to everybody who worked on the team, and I'll do specific shout outs later. But thank you, Mrs. Dampierre. Thank you for the work of this entire district, moving us in a direction that is, as Dr. Moore always says, best by kids, not just academically, but best by kids behaviorally, emotionally, in everything that we do. So music to my ears, thank you. I'll shut up now. I'll stop.
Thank you. Mrs. Justice?
Thank you very much. Some time ago, we were lucky enough to have some teachers come in and talk to us about CHAMPS, which was a classroom management tool that some teachers were using. And there were some new teachers who felt that it was very helpful for them to be able to set expectations for their students, especially our youngest students, in a very clear way. And then we saw when that was done on a school-wide basis, where everyone spoke the same language and everyone had the same expectations, we were able to focus on learning rather than behavior correction. So I don't know that, I think there are lots of great things that we can do, and I don't think it's my job to tell you which one to pick. I think that's your job and Dr. Moore's job, but I am thankful for treating students with respect and telling them what the expectations are and holding them accountable when they do make different decisions and helping them to learn from their mistakes. As we move forward, not specifically just in a classroom, but from a school-wide perspective, one of the things that we have seen is blanket rules made for all students based on the poor choices of some. And I know for my children and for other children who do tend to try to follow the rules, although I've got a couple that, veer off the path once in a while, it's frustrating, right? Some kids throw food at lunch, or now we have silent lunch, right? That's frustrating. Some kids don't play nicely with the ball on the basketball court, and now there's no more basketball at recess, right? So the learning doesn't stop in the classroom. It continues in every space on a school campus, from the bathroom to everywhere, right? And everything's an opportunity for learning. So I hope not only are these expectations set in the classroom, but that we take a much more proactive approach with our teachers and school staff during those times with our students where they have more movement or they have more freedom, because they need to learn what the expectations are in those instances. It's not fair to hold a child to an expectation that they're not aware of, right? So like the bus and all of those things that we talk about. So just in general, thank you for the work that you do, and I do hope that this filters out into all of the different spaces on a campus, because they are truly learning spaces.
Thank you. Mrs. Rosario?
Thank you. Mrs. Dampierre, I don't see in the attachment some of the changes that we talked about, the small little edits. One of the things, let me back up. Let me first say thank you so much for all the work that you have done and that everybody has done to put this together, because it truly is a huge departure from where we were. And I appreciate it. I even appreciate the look of it. There's a lot of bullet points rather than, narrative form, boring reading. It's an easy pickup tool that can be used truly as a resource, and it's applicable when you're in the school building. You don't have time to, fidget through or really read through this large document. You can actually pick it up, and it's accessible. So with that said, there was one of the things that I suggested for board members, just so that you know, and for the public, is that in some of these areas, what needs to be understood from the general public, from parents even, who might be unfamiliar with this format, is that a lot of the suggestions that are in here, the corrective interventions that are provided within each of these categories, they're really guides. They're suggestions and examples. It doesn't limit the many other interventions that can be applied for certain behaviors. So one of my suggestions was to add in some of these categories, especially with the multi-tiered system of supports, is to add MTSS, let's say tier 1, or evidence or examples of evidence-based tier programs may include but are not limited to. That kind of language to allow for teachers to find some other kind of research-based intervention and can apply it. Those are the kinds of things that I was suggesting. And so, Mrs. Dampier, back to you and back to my original question. I don't see some of that in the backup.
Through the chair. The reason being is that it was already posted, it's still in draft form. I have all of your suggestions, I'm still collecting suggestions as we speak. Today was just an overview for the board workshop of the changes, suggested changes. We still will be making changes to the document, it's still in draft form. So tonight,
When is this coming to us? It's coming to us tonight.
it's coming for, to place it on as a hearing, public hearing.
Got
So
it. Okay.
I had someone called about a suggestion, so if it's a minor, tweak here and there, I'm gonna, add it to it. But I just wanted to do it all at one time instead of updating it 3 or 4 times because it's still in draft form.
Okay, so when it comes to us, it's still going to be
Yes.
in draft form, but
Yes.
you are going
Yes.
to make the,
I have all yours
guess-
start. Yes.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to make sure that that was taken. I also want to clarify, and that's with the verbiage of understanding who a dean was and is that when we read this document as success coach, that's really what is or was known as a dean.
Yes. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the job description of the success coach.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, but for the purpose of this, that was one of the other things that I made known, or rather that I caught up in this. Also, what I found that I liked in this new plan is that transportation, disciplinary actions for transportation or corrective actions really for transportation are included and embedded within each of these interventions or levels of intervention. And I like that rather than having it a separate policy or a separate disciplinary action. I like that it's included and that it's school-based. It actually sets a precedence that we are together, that we're working together, and that what happens on the school bus is going to be supported at the school level. So I want bus drivers who will see this to feel encouraged and to feel supported. I don't want them to think that we have created a document that does not support them. When a child is on their bus, if there is a misbehavior, there is still levels of intervention to get to before or automatically, suspending a kid from the bus and kicking them off of the bus. I mean, there is progressive discipline that this plan actually covers. Am I correct in how I articulated that, Mrs. Dampier?
Yes, and we are going to add one of your suggestions, which I think was a good one for tier intervention 2, that we add a verbal or written warning on the bus, just so they have something besides just the parent contact, which we're going to add that as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That also was something that we talked about because I also sometimes a warning is enough. And we didn't have that already here, and I appreciate you taking my suggestions to heart. I'm actually going through some of the pages here. I love the formatting of it, and I am just very excited to see this in action. I'm excited to see and hear the feedback from school building administrators, not just teachers. I know that this is very important for teachers, but school-based administrators and soon-to-be deans in our schools and guidance counselors. I'm just interested to hear their feedback on this. So I'm just excited. I thank you. I know that this is going to be in an electronic form, which is also something new. where people will be able to sign off on it electronically.
Yes.
And I think that'll help us be more green in our efforts. So lots of changes to come. So good thing, good thing. Thank you all very much for this.
All right. Mrs. Berenborg.
Yes, Mrs. Dampier, could you please just discuss quickly how CISR is going to be improved or updated for this, and maybe what CISR is?
Well, we have to report certain codes to the state and to law enforcement. If, say, for instance, there's a weapon, we have to, it's a CISR code, and we have to report that to the state, and we have to monitor that, those codes and submit that information to the state, as well as look at what are some areas that we need to focus on. So we're going to be utilizing that data, as well as some of our other areas with restraints, looking at that. Also looking at 10-day suspensions of our ESC students. We're monitoring that. So we're going to put some provisions in place where we are able to monitor this and be able to have trainings, as well as work with our assistant principals with looking at, and deans, now that we have deans, and principals at looking at this data and making some decisions, and possibly having some conversations of how, things that we can do differently on those campuses. So we're going to be monitoring it more effectively, I think, that now that we have a plan in place. But we're going to be teaching those strategies when a kid brings a weapon, things of that nature. Those are CISR codes. We have to, report that to the state. We're bound. So.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Schiff?
Thank you. Mrs. Dampier, in reviewing the code of conduct, we talked about a couple of things that I'm not seeing here. So I want to ask if you could take a moment to talk through some of those. We talked specifically about the restorative practices, and I only see those still at Tier 1 and ALTOS, out of school suspension. We talked about whether or not those would be integrated into levels 2, 3, and 4 in any way. That's part A of the question. Part 2 is, we also talked about having a caveat that those types of practices were only to be used by people who had been trained in how to use them properly and with fidelity, and I don't see that note here in the code of conduct. So I'm hoping that's going to be added. I have another question, but I'll let you answer those two first, then I'll go to the last one.
Those were, I don't see them right now, but I know that they were added because same thing with Ms. Rosario, certain ones, because the document was already posted. We didn't go back and make changes along the way. We're going to make those changes all at once. Then to go back and pull it and then take it down, pull it, take it down, that kind of thing. So we do have, just like I have with Rosario, I have things marked in here specifically for that. But that was very important, that we do not have schools just deciding that they want to use, say, restorative justice or restorative practices, and they haven't been trained. Just because they just want to do a circle, or a guidance counselor or whomever wants to go and do a circle, we call it restorative justice or we call it restorative practice. You need to really go through that intensive training and be trained, just like with any other intervention. We don't want our interventions to be used haphazardly and not done correctly, because it hurts the students, it hurts the teachers, and it hurts the implementation at the school level. So we want to do it with good implementation, starting with at the district level, it must be approved by our department, where we have some say-so as to what is being implemented at the schools. And that has not been the case. I mean, if a school wanted to do, they decided, oh, I went to a conference, I want to come back and use restorative justice, they implemented it, and we didn't know anything about it. We're going to put structures in place where they have to notify and we have to approve before they go in and implement a new program. And that's just not with this, but with anything else. We want to have that fidelity check there so we can make sure that it's being implemented, as well as that we can support that. Because you can have it, and if we can't support it, you can't just have it at your school and think that you're going to support it with the staff that you have. We want to be able to support it at the district level because that's why we're here. So that is the goal, is that everything has to come through the district as far as any program implementation, and it has to be a why. Does it support our strategic plan? Does it support our goals and objectives in our strategic plan? Is that a good fit for your school? So it will be on a case-by-case basis, and they'll have to have the rationale, similar to what we did when someone wanted to have bring a supplemental as far as the academic, they wanted to have a supplemental resource. They had to come to a team and they had to approve it, be able to tell why, how does it relate to the strategic plan and all of that. So we want to monitor and be able to make sure that it's implemented with fidelity and that the district is supporting that. And that is what that school needs.
Thank you. Yes, I did owe the amen. I've seen tremendous harm done when things are implemented, called by a particular name that are not actually consistent with the practice of that thing. I've seen harm done when people call something restorative simply because they sit in a circle and then they're actually very punitive. Or when they say because there was an apology, therefore it was restorative, when in fact it wasn't. So yes, yes, and yes on ensuring implementation with fidelity, ensuring consistent training, and ensuring infrastructure for how we do this well. The other part of my question has to do with parent outreach. One of the things that we know about the Code of Conduct is that it gets sent home with students every year. Your child hands it to you and says, here, mom, sign this. You sign it, and then you don't look at it again, or the student doesn't look at it again. I'm hoping that as we go forward into the year, we can create some kind of structure to do some outreach, some training, some support for parents, for families, on what this document actually means, because it's a foundational document that defines a lot of what we do in this county, or what we do around discipline, what we do around conduct, what we do on so many things, not just discipline. So I'm hoping that we will set up a structure where we not only emphasize the importance of this, but we give some guidance and support and training about how to use this document effectively as a resource and as an advocacy, really. It enables parents to advocate for their children as well. So maybe either you or Dr. Moore could speak to how we're going to roll that out.
Well, I've already spoken to my team, and they've put that on the list. We have a list of running things that we need to do, and I know that is on there, a one-pager with some of the suggestions that you mentioned, but also having some training for parents on this as well as equipping our administrators and our guidance counselors and now that we have success coaches at the open house, at some of these back-to-school nights, parent nights, with having them be able to train and be able to speak about the new changes in our new handbook as well. So it's a work in progress right now. We just we wanted to get this approved first. But it is on our list, and we've already, I know Dr. Packard and Dr. Parendozzi have already gotten excited and come up with some ideas, so we already have some ideas in the works for that. But yes, that is on our list. That is a part of the plan. We want to engage all stakeholders. Like I said, it's not just the teachers. We have to train the students, our administrators, our parents as well, because they can help with some of these behaviors, teaching these behaviors at home and modeling some of this at home. And we just want to have a comprehensive approach to this, not just at the school level, but also have it be taught at the home as well.
Okay, is that it? Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, just a quick thank you for suggesting. A lot of this is also about modeling at home. Mm-hmm. I know I do a lot of these practices at home, and I know parents do them in the ways that they do. We can't create an effective system at schools if we're not working in collaboration with parents doing the same thing at home. And I've seen that happen, where sometimes a practice we are asking kids to do in school is not only not supported at home, but can actually be dangerous in the community or at home. And we need to create something that is consistent and holistic. And so thank you for mentioning that, because this is only as good as the supports that we have. So I'm looking forward to seeing the developments and being a part of that as much as possible.
And we also want some ideas like we've done with the social emotional learning through the COVID, how we're posting things for parents on our website, through Twitter. We want to be able to do that as well, some of these behaviors, teaching it. Also, we could possibly do some competition. So we're just starting to have the conversation about this, about how this can flow for next year. So I have a whole list of everybody's wants, so we're going to make it happen.
Okay. All right. So I think it's fantastic work. I think, you know, the easy read to it. I think whenever a parent has a question, it's an easy read. They can go straight to it and see the levels of the tiers. So I think that's great. Always with great ideas and new initiatives is, you know, we can come up with the work and we can spend hours and hours at the district, but, you know, one of my concerns always is how are we going to implement it into the classrooms? Who's going to be doing the training? And is it going to be professional development and helping? You know, it's not just a one-time training, it's an ongoing training. And so that, you know, at the beginning of the year, we're training the teachers, but we're not giving them the full support throughout the year. So I'm pretty confident with your team and with Dr. Moore that that's not going to be the case here, but that's always, you know, been a concern when we put new plans and implement a new plan, is making sure that we have the professional development that goes with that.
And my team, we have a preliminary professional development schedule started with some of the work that we're going to be doing, as well as working with the curriculum and instruction department for parts of it with professional development. But we're also looking at how we can embed this into our monthly meetings with our assistant principals, as well as our success coach, our guidance counselors. We want to be able to embed it so everybody hears the same thing, and then we can go back, and then we also go out and provide that coaching and modeling as well for teachers. So no, this is not a one-time. It won't work if it's just a one and done. We plan on working on this throughout the year, and it's not going to be like at the beginning of the year where everything is great. We're going to have to work through some things, and we're going to teach them. We're going to model. We're going to teach the students. We want to teach the school counselors. We want to teach the administrators. We're going to be starting with them first, as well as our success coach, working in tandem with the ISS, the guidance counselors, everybody working as a cohesive team. This won't work in isolation. It has to be done together and working as a unit. So that is the goal. That the professional development will be ongoing.
Okay, I appreciate you confirming that. I was hoping that would be the answer that you would give me. Another area is, because we do have such a good plan now that we're about to approve, is putting together sections of a video for the code of conduct so that we can have that and we can roll it out to parents and students so that they can not only, I mean, this is a very detailed plan. I think if we could put it into a video, of some type of form of presentation, I think that we could really get the message across better to our parents and our students.
And little snippets of behavioral strategies as well, so teachers can access those behavioral strategies. If a kid, what do you do for transition? This is what it looks like. What do we do for the cafeteria or on the bus? On the bus, that kind of thing. So what does that look like? So not just sit and get. We need them modeling and coaching and seeing it.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. Mrs. Justice?
Thank you very much. I think the video idea is a great idea. So I was reading about Zoom meetings, Dr. Moore, and reading about teachers. And we now live in this age of like MTV video, I mean, right? But you can't just sit there as a teacher. I mean, I watch my kids, like his teacher does a Canvas conference, and they're not doing Zoom, but they can write in.
Right.
And I mean, he's bored out of his mind. right? So, no, I'm serious, and I love his teacher, she's great, but I mean, she's teaching him about quadrilaterals, and he's staring at the light, and, you know, so, well, it's true. So, what I wanted to ask was this, I think the video is a great idea. How great would it be if your superintendent's advisory council or some kids did the video? Because nothing helps kids make better choices
Kids seeing
than
each other.
other kids, right? And then, also, the other thing that I would say is peer pressure is a big deal, right? Like it is, for good and bad. But once you've got, you know, we've talked about, is there a safety team at the high schools, a student safety team, or some type of empowering students to make good choices and then holding each other accountable when someone's not making a good choice? Because before that written warning or that referral or anything happens, all it could take would be a kid saying to another kid, like, hey, man, you're going to get in trouble for that. You know, man, you knock it off. I can't, you know. But the video with the kids, I mean,
With some music.
with some music? No, but for real, because
Wow.
when we did the career in tech, I remember there was a brochure for a career in tech, and I looked at it, and it looked like it was from 1972. It was all orange and brown and yellow. It was antiquated, and no kid in their right mind was like, wow, I want to be a welder. This looks like fun. It looks, I mean, so if we're going to do stuff, I think it's great, but can we, everybody's laughing. Listen, I'll dance in the video if we need to. No, Kristen will dance in the video. But I know I'm joking, but the truth of the matter is that it's great to do stuff. I think the video is a great idea. But, you know, we have parents that go to orientation. It's a lot of different things. The why. We can answer the why for kids with the code of conduct, but it's bigger than that. What about iReady? You know, do kids understand? I had such an interesting conversation, right, with your kids about, like, why is the iReady diagnostic important? You know, what? So, anyway, I just think we need to make an effort to make it fun, and you're a fun guy, so,
Yes.
you know.
To the channel. Everyone knows that yet. But I wholeheartedly agree. I think this work, just to kind of summarize everything, this is a great first step. And Ms. Dampier said it correctly, as echoed by board members. If all we do is produce a streamlined, easy-to-read, student-first document and do nothing else, then we fail children. Ms. Dampier is selling her work and her team's work short in terms of embedding this work into practice and bring it to life within each and every single school. And I think that is the work. We will ensure that this plan goes to the SAC committee, school advisory committee. We will ensure those committees are receiving updates regarding discipline at their school sites. We've already, at our secondary schools, restarted a advisory group for our African-American students. They will receive that support. We'll begin to replicate that through student governments in all schools, bringing this to life. This is not about controlling an environment. This is about helping students identify what behaviors in a community, in a society, lead to success. And as smart as someone could be, as intelligent as someone can be, but if they don't know how to interact with their peers and solve problems and resolve conflicts with their peers, they're not going to find the success that their intelligence says they may be able to have. And I think this is just as important. So I am so proud of this work. I think the video is an absolute perfect way of ensuring this isn't just adults saying, do A, B, C, and D, but collectively as an organization or as a community defining what is acceptable and allowing students the voice to say what is and is not. And, you know, I would say when I was a teacher, you know, you guys need to hold each other accountable. You know, me saying it versus someone else, you enforcing it, is so much more powerful. And that is just the truth, and I think that's the work that we're going to embark on next year. I think the team, the committee is very excited, not only in the document created, but the process of building a collective understanding and ownership on how we ultimately improve the quality of instruction, while at the same time enhancing the comfort that every student feels and their collective understanding as to why they're in that environment to find success. So this is a big win for us as an organization, and very exciting work that we will continue to build upon for the years to come, and continue to evaluate and shift and modify to improve implementation as we move throughout the year.
Okay. Well, thank you, and we'll approve the public hearing tonight, I believe. Yes. So with that, I think that wraps up all your items,
I
correct?
have one brief item on the backside. It's relatively straightforward. It's
I
just sneaking in there.
missed it.
It is new and revised job descriptions. Ms. Dampier has two, and
Okay.
Mr. Meyer. They're simply just updates and new creations to support our work. So we'll briefly
Okay.
go over those two, and then me and Mr. Gressa will go write a letter.
The first one is the success coach. That is a new position, which, like Ms. Rosario referred to as a dean, this position will help assist the principal in developing interventions. We really want to focus on interventions, not just writing referrals and processing referrals, which will support students academically and behaviorally, creating and maintaining a safe and secure environment which is conducive to learning. And that is the goal of this position. We also, this position just requires a bachelor's degree and a valid teacher's certificate, and it is a 10-month position, 196.
Okay.
The next position is a revised position. It's updated to include, we added school-wide, that this person will promote school-wide SEL, which is the social and emotional learning component of it, as well as we wanted to make sure we added the elementary, because we haven't had counselors at the elementary level, so we added elementary 196, which would be the 10 months to this job description. And we eliminated the No Child Left Behind, that's outdated requirement. And so with these two positions working as a system of support at the schools, we feel like this is going to create a positive culture and assist in creating a positive culture on the school campus to support our student code of conduct.
And then the next will be presented. I'm sorry, Ms. Rosario has a question.
Thank you. I am so excited about this position because I've been talking about putting deans into our schools since I started as school board member. And I've seen firsthand successful deans in these positions really make a difference for the functioning of the school building. This position has freed up assistant principals to actually get into the classroom and really get to work with teachers on instruction and really help the building principal with a lot of other administrative duties. This position is a position that should be supportive of the instructional push in a school. Their mission and their vision should be supported by this position as well. But what I see here, obviously we've changed the name, right? So we went from dean to success coach, which sounds great. There's one thing that I have a question here on number 7, and that is, it says in number 7, supervise and implement in-school suspension to modify behaviors that will support an optimal student-centered learning environment. So if we have a success coach, I'm just curious as to how this is going to work. If we have a success coach who is in an in-school suspension, that person is unable to do what I know deans do in general, which is to support teachers in a classroom if a student needs to be removed from a classroom, to do hallway duty, I suppose, in between passing of schools, to be present during lunch duty, to actually have parent conferences, to engage with students and if there is an investigation that needs to happen, to actually facilitate a one-on-one with children who have a conflict with one another so that, their beef with each other is actually squashed at the end of the meeting. The work of the daily dean or the success coach is so busy throughout the day and so multifaceted that if this person is in an in-school suspension position, that person is quite literally not going to be able to process referrals and do everything else that we're expecting them to do. So from a legitimate, I mean, from really ground zero, what are we looking at for this position?
Through the chair, I think it's everything you just described, although they'll be responsible for the design, just as they have them right now, minus this position. Schools will still have those programs running and maybe run at the discretion of the principal regarding a different teacher, maybe other adult personnel in that particular classroom, but we do want to ensure that we're maximizing, as you described, the assistant principals really to drive or as best they can to be in classrooms to support our teachers. So the intent is not to have these success coaches locked down at one particular room, but to provide guidance and supervision of the shift in practice as it relates to indoor suspension, ensuring that that environment within the school being implemented by the principal is in fact not a holding place for students or a pause or a timeout room, but an opportunity really to help students identify what maladaptive behavior got them into that environment and how they could establish the behaviors or develop the behaviors to replace that maladaptive behavior. So it's an opportunity just to dig deeper in terms of what we're doing in CSI and give principals and administrators a little bit of cover to continue to do all of the complex things they have to do. So I think our thinking is aligned here.
I don't doubt that. I do believe that it's aligned. I just don't see how one person is going to be able to do all of the above and be successful at it when you have 20 other kids that need your attention at the same time. So it's just something to think about, because at some point they're either going to need a dean's clerk to help process some of the paperwork while this person is engaged in some, literal student intervention, or something else, So I think that's definitely from the daily management of it. I'm sure that you've got it under wraps, but I don't want to set us up for confusion in this area, and I certainly don't want the success coach to be pulled to cover classes. If we have an absence or something like that, this person shouldn't be pulled just because there's an extra body and the person has certification. I mean, we should be able to cover some of these areas, because then otherwise what's the use? What's the purpose of getting a dean? The dean of students, typically reports to the principal, and in some cases is actually an administrator in training maybe, or someone who's looking for that position. It doesn't necessarily mean that that person has to seek administrative, an administrative position, but that they manage this department well enough with the strategies in place. And if they don't have that support, it's really, ultimately, it's just going to fall down hard on student behavior, which is why we want them there in the first place. So I just wanted to share that with you for this position, and I'm glad to support this.
Thank you. And just to give the reassurance, as we craft the responsibilities above and beyond the job description, daily responsibilities at school sites, please know through our impact reviews, not only are we looking at instruction, we're looking at the indoor suspension program. I assure you with all confidence, we will not be allowing school counselors or those who are defined to provide social emotional support and guidance to use them as substitutes. That is not the intent. We will honor the work that they're supposed to be doing. So I know as we implement the program, we'll have clearly defined responsibilities at school sites to ensure everyone knows what they're doing, and we're designing ourselves in the way to be successful. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Berenborg?
Yeah, Mrs. Rosario touched a little bit on what I want to discuss, and that is, this position is a valuable position for a principal, but it's also sometimes a good stepping stone into administration. I know I'm getting feedback.
We can hear you fine.
Is that better?
You're fine.
No.
Okay, so I'm concerned, or I guess I have a question as to why aren't the qualifications then, if we want, and I know from the surveys that we looked at last year that people want leadership opportunities, they want those advancement opportunities. Why aren't we then saying for a qualification that they need to have more than a bachelor's degree or ed leadership? I'm just curious. I'm not saying we have to, but I'm just curious why we don't.
Through the chair, one of the things that we just pushed out to principals and assistant principals is our assistant principal and principal pool. We're going through the process of interviewing those who desire to be an assistant principal or principal. We'll be conducting those interviews later in the month, vetting those individuals and placing individuals in the pool. And then as we move through a 2-year process, provide them ongoing development to ensure when we have an opening, we have them set and ready to go. We have built ourselves a bench to ensure that we're always growing those who have desire to seek administration. I agree with you that a possibility to grow those skills is as a dean or as a success coach. But we want to provide multiple paths and multiple opportunities. There may be someone who says, you know what, working with students is the burden that's placed on my heart. A real administrator, you got to deal with adults, which really isn't as much fun as dealing with children. That's where I want to go, and we should afford that opportunity as well. So there will be situations where we have a dean, that is their calling, that is their gift, that is where they want to be, but they are not certified in administration. But we, coming from a large system, yes, instructional coaches was a pathway to administration, as was deans, but we want to have that flexibility on both sides. So that's the rationale regarding just not having ed leadership. We don't want to put ourselves in a corner.
Okay, that makes sense. The other question I had was concerning the instructional coach position. Do you want me to ask that now?
I'd hold, Mr. Meyer is eagerly waiting to come and present those descriptions.
Okay.
Right, then now Mr. Meyer is going to come and present his 2 job descriptions, and then we will be done for the day.
No.
No, I'm sorry, not done for the day. Done for the afternoon.
Dr. Moore, did you just send everyone home at the end of this meeting?
I just want to remind everyone tonight that it is prom night for the school district, and everyone is asked to wear their prom attire for grad week. And I look forward to seeing the prom dresses
My
and the
cummerbund
tuxes
didn't
tonight.
fit. It was the same one. It didn't fit. I don't know. Mr. Meyer, go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. The 2 job descriptions I have the pleasure to bring to you today are the instructional coach and the reading intervention teacher. Moving forward with the vision that Dr. Moore has for the district, instructional coaching is going to be a huge part of that. And as you can tell from the job description, one of the requirements that I'd like to bring to your attention is that the coaches would be certified or endorsed in the area of which they will be providing that coaching. So I think that's a big move forward to ensure that those that are supporting, let's say, a high school algebra teacher are actually certified to teach algebra themselves. As far as the individual that will be fulfilling the role of the reading intervention teacher, you'll also notice in that it has the requirements that those staff members would be certified or endorsed in reading. Once again, the state statutes beginning next year that the teachers that provide intensive reading interventions must be certified or endorsed in reading. So we were going ahead and put that right up front there for this job description for a reading intervention teacher. And those are the 2 positions that we're bringing forward for next year.
Okay.
You have to take any questions. I know there's already one, but welcome any others.
We have a couple board members that do already have questions. So Mrs. Berenborg.
Yeah, I have no problem with this job description. It's great. The only question I have is about the pool. So we have a pool for administrators now. Do we have a pool for coaches? And if so, should there be something on the job description about that?
Well, we do, and so those, we've done 2 rounds of interviews. One where the individuals responded, to some typical questions. They watched the video, gave feedback on that, and then they did a virtual interview with a team Those are concluding. I think the last one was today. And next week, we are actually beginning the Instructional Coach Academy. So all of the individuals that will be moving into the pool will have an opportunity to participate in that. If they are selected for a position, of course, they'll go into that position beginning next year. And the ones that were not selected for one of the open positions will continue to be part of the pool, as Dr. Moore said, as we move forward, giving that training to those that made it through at least that far in the process so that they are prepared to move into a position when it opens. And so to your question then, Ms. Berenborg, about should that be necessary as part of the job description, our thought process there was not to, I guess it would, maybe the word be inhibit an external candidate. We wanted to offer the opportunity for promotion within to our teachers, but we have to understand that certifications, like we said, we value those coverage areas, and if we did find ourselves wanting to offer instructional coaching in a coverage area that, quite honestly, we just didn't have anyone in the district, we would not want to preclude ourselves from offering the opportunity to get someone externally, and by saying they must be, you know, a completer of the School District Indian River Coaching Academy. So that's why we left that open in the job description.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Justice?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Mr. Meyer. I was happy to see that the reading intervention teacher reports to the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. I'd like to share with you a brief story, if I could, and my fellow board members perhaps haven't heard this before. I was speaking with someone who works in the school district in a classroom, and they had shared with me some of the frustration that they had, because we had had some reading intervention specialists that were working with a nonprofit who, first of all, had started at a school, but the nonprofit had actually hired them away from us, unfortunately. And there was some confusion as to who they took direction from.
Sure.
The other thing was that as a quasi employee of the school district, they had a little bit more freedom too.
Mm-hmm.
So for a teacher who is surrounded by 18 kids who can't even find a minute to use the bathroom, you can imagine how frustrating it might be to see someone come in with a warm Starbucks coffee in their hand or something, right, in the middle of the day. So these are important positions that are so important for students, but I'm happy to see the control remains within the district, or with and however you work that out with principals, of
Sure.
course. Because it's not, it's an important job, but it's not a fancy job or a special job or a job better than being a teacher, or that gives you some freedom or flexibility to not be under the same umbrella of all of the expectations of all employees, right? I just wanted to thank you for that and thank Dr. Moore. There has been, I understand it has been difficult for some of our administrators at times because their staff has not always received direction from them. Mm-hmm. And at times, staff and principals have questioned, who do I listen to? So I think this just really shows you taking control of this situation and bringing everyone back to the center again. And I appreciate your dedication to standards-aligned instruction so that our students are truly learning what they need to learn in the classroom every day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mrs. Rosario has a question.
Thank
Yes, Ms.
you.
Rosario. Yep.
Is this position, because I noticed the title is we're removing guidance from the title, and we are only calling it school counselor. But is this position, and I'm going to say no because on the back of it, I was going to first initially ask if this was for secondary positions only. But when I turned it over, I realized that on the back, under terms of employment, we are listing elementary and secondary. And I was just concerned about that because there is, the job goal states to provide students with educational, personal, and vocational counseling. So when I saw the vocational, I'm thinking this is only for secondary. I don't know if we should just take away vocational and just leave counseling in general so that it can rightly apply, K through 12.
Through the chair, I think the way the job description reads, first, school counselor, National Association of School Counselor, about 10 years ago, had a national movement to switch from guidance counselor to school counselor based on their training and their ability to provide support, addressing social emotional support for students. So in looking at a guidance, it's more than just guidance from someone who has a master's degree in counseling and served as a school counselor. Want to stand in respect and reverence of their skills and their preparation and their degree, and acknowledge them and the skill set that they have through that degree. As you look at that job description now, it is an all-encompassing job description where it's the academic, social, and vocational. And when you get into those middle school years, it would be vocational training. It is not rare for a elementary school student to go in career explorations and begin to design what could be some interest. So it is relatively open for interpretation, which allows us to have that one job description that meets the needs at all three grade configurations.
No, I like the job title. I'm not questioning. I think I just said it, in order to kind of preface my way into the vocational part in the job goal. Do we need vocational in there? Because at the kindergarten level, I'm sure we're not providing vocational guidance.
Through the chair, do we need it? We don't want to exclude it. So in certain levels, it may not be something they speak about, but in other levels, it would be something they read about. So as it reads, I think it is all-encompassing that allows that counselor to address those varying needs of the individual students.
Okay, and then my next question is, and you probably already answered this, do we have to, is there some kind of maybe statute or maybe some kind of regulation that a school counselor or a school guidance counselor has to have certification in guidance counseling? Can we offer that or a master's in social work? And if somebody doesn't have certification, can someone with a master's in social work be given a grace period of a year to get that certification?
Through the chair, there are opportunities just in knowing people where you have an out-of-field waiver in counseling and you're working towards that. So the answer to your question is yes. I can't speak specifically regarding the requirements to receive that waiver, but would there be an opportunity for someone to work under a out-of-field waiver, which the waiver in itself means you're agreeing to pursue the requirements of certification within a certain amount of time, then that has been a standard practice in most districts.
So can we add that as a qualification? So under number 2, it says Florida certification in guidance counseling. Can we say something like a Florida certification in guidance counseling preferred, or something to that effect, and then possible waivers are granted to someone with a master's in social work?
Through the chair, if you have that waiver, that is a waiver that is provided by the state, which allows you to hold that employment. I would be hard-pressed to water down any requirement that puts a adult in front of children. I think from a systems perspective, we are of the business of teaching and learning, degreeing and credentialing individuals, and we need to have the absolute highest expectation of those who we put in front of our children, which means they are certified to do the work that we've charged them to do.
So this waiver is not something that's locally, they get it from the state, you said, right?
It's, through the chair, there's a state statute that allows individuals to be out of field for any coverage area. But I think that what we want, to Dr. Moore's point, is to first and foremost seek out and ensure if we have applicants that meet the requirements, that we hire the most qualified applicants. If you don't have someone per se, like going back to the algebra example or for school counseling or reading, then that's where the state gives you that opportunity to allow someone to be out of field as long as they're working towards getting in field. And so the rule is that they have to complete 6 semester hours a year in order to retain that out of field status, and they continue doing that until they become in field. But looking at most job descriptions across the state, to Dr. Moore's point, you start with the expectation that you hire fully certified and credentialed individuals.
Okay, thank you.
With that,
Oh,
Madam,
last question, sorry. This is a 10-month position. Why isn't it a 12-month?
through the chair, I think you're referring to the school counselor position. Just a way of looking at, they're providing direct services and support to students. So moving on to an 11th or 12-month position, there may be opportunities to do a daily stipend for teachers based on the principal's discretion if he or she needs that at a secondary level, which is what we would envision happening. So keeping it at a 10-month position maximizes and stretches our dollars as far as they can go.
Okay.
Through the chair, those are the items. We're about 30 minutes over. I apologize for that, but based on this, the initial conversation, we will circle back at 6 o'clock, and I'll have that letter emailed to you prior to the start of our next meeting. But thank you for your
Okay.
time and patience.
Thank you. So we'll see you back at 6 o'clock with your prom gear on. And I want to thank Brandon for going ahead and getting dressed behind me. Ladies, I don't know if you can see him. He's in his tuxedo already, ready to go. So thank you to Brandon. I will see you at 6, and we're going to call this meeting right now at 4:31.